Chapter 394. In the end, Mo Tiange accepted Nia Wushang's proposal. She was right. Although she didn't know what happened, she was sure those core formation cultivators' lives were in no danger. Since their lives weren't in danger, what was there for her to be afraid of? Nia Wushang once said her concealment technique was extraordinary. Even nascent soul cultivators would have a hard time detecting her. As for herself, she had the virtual sky world. As long as she could use spiritual aura and didn't get corroded by the dead aura like what happened to Ren Yufeng, escaping wouldn't be a problem. Moreover, she still had Mo Yaoqing's land shrinking ruler that she hadn't used yet. With that thought in mind, the two of them calmly followed Elder Liang. Elder Liang was very happy to see them. Both of them were in the middle stage of the core formation realm. If they were really unwilling, he'd be in trouble this time. He was too incompetent as an elder to always let the Castellan take action. After walking for a while, the three of them arrived at a mansion in the city. This mansion occupied a very large area and occupied the center of Starfall City where the devil aura was the densest. The whole mansion was shrouded in a devil aura restriction. If they rashly probed it with their divine sense, they'd be injured by the restriction. Elder Liang. Upon seeing Elder Liang approaching with the two of them, the cultivators guarding the mansion saluted respectfully. Elder Liang nodded faintly and said, "Open the restriction." Yes. The guard respectfully used his identity tablet to open the restriction of the mansion. Mo Tiange glanced at the mansion. The guards of the mansion were led by two foundation building cultivators and a team of 9th and 10th layer aura refining cultivators. One team guarded the gate while the other patrolled nearby. Considering the size of the mansion, two teams of guards were considered few. However, the mansion's power still came from the nascent soul Castellan, so the guards weren't very important. However, it seemed this Castellan wasn't ostentatious and should be a practical person. Elder Liang invited the two of them into the mansion. They walked through corridors and halls until they reached the back garden. Mo Tiange was a bit surprised. This Castellan's way of treating guests was indeed a bit casual. However, when she thought the other party was a nascent soul cultivator, she felt relieved. Their cultivation levels weren't worthy of this Castellan's courtesy. When they arrived at the back garden, Elder Liang directly led them into a small parlor and said, "Fellow Taoists, please wait here for a moment. The city lord will be here soon." Mo Tiange nodded to show she understood. Elder Liang smiled and invited the two of them to take a seat. After sending out a message talisman, he sat beside them and chatted with them. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang's minds weren't on this either. They casually agreed while waiting for the Master of Descent Star City to arrive. After a while, a strong aura approached them from afar, heading towards the flower hall. At the same time, a voice rang in their ears, "Welcome to Descending Star City, my friends." As soon as he finished speaking, a figure quickly flashed into the small reception hall and landed on the main seat. This kind of aura was undoubtedly that of a nascent soul cultivator. The three of them stood up, and Elder Liang rushed forward to greet him. "Subordinate greets the city lord." Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang also stood up to show their respect to nascent soul cultivators. When they looked up, they saw a young man dressed in luxurious clothes sitting on the main seat. This young man was very young. He looked like he was only 15 or 16 years old. He wasn't tall, and he was very skinny, unlike an adult man. Even if he was slightly shorter, his shoulders would still be broad and sturdy. This made his luxurious clothes look like a burden piled on his body, and it didn't feel like it was fitting at all. His left eye was covered with a blindfold, and he had only one eye. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang were both experienced and knowledgeable people. In an instant, they finished examining the city lord of Descending Star City, but their faces didn't show any signs of surprise. Although this city lord looked young, his voice carried a sense of seniority. Furthermore, there were traces of time on his eyebrows and hands. His actual age was definitely not young anymore. "Greetings, city lord." Mo Tiange slightly lowered her eyebrows and cupped her hands to greet him. Then, she immediately asked, why did you order Elder Liang to invite us to the city lord's mansion? The young man's single eye was carefully examining the two of them. At that moment, he waved his hand, signaling Elder Liang to leave. He then invited them to sit down again before saying, although your cultivation levels are only in the middle stage of the core formation realm, your spiritual aura is thick and condensed. Presumably, your strength is extraordinary. City Lord, you're being too polite. Mo Tiange cautiously looked at him. This young man was different from Elder Liang. Elder Liang's devil aura was so thick that it was visible to the naked eye, but this young man's devil aura was so faint that it was almost undetectable. After the young man finished examining them, he pointed at them and asked with a smile, "This is Qin Wei, little friend Qin, and this is little friend Tian Can. Am I right?" Elder Liang had already informed them of their identities through a summoning talisman. Their appearances and names were exactly the same, so this young man naturally recognized them correctly. Mo Tiange smiled slightly. Nia Wushang didn't like to talk, so she communicated on her behalf. Yes. The young man nodded and introduced himself. I'm Starfall City City Lord. My surname is Mei and my name is Feng. So it's City Lord Mei. I've heard a lot about you. Mo Tiange's expression was completely calm. Upon seeing this, City Lord Mei laughed and said, all right, let's not talk about these empty courtesies. Since little friend Qin asked me why I invited you, you must be an impatient person. How about we get straight to the point? Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang naturally didn't have any objections. They were both impatient people who treated empty courtesies, so they immediately nodded and said, City Lord Mei, please speak. City Lord Mei said with a smile, presumably, that elder of mine has already mentioned it to you too, right? The matter is simple. I want to ask you two to help me with something. If you succeed, I'll reward you handsomely. Elder Liang had already mentioned this before. Mo Tiange said, this. Juniors don't understand. With City Lord Mei's cultivation level and the elders of Starfall City, your strength is quite extraordinary. What kind of matter do you need help from outsiders like us? Even if you want to help, wouldn't City Lord Mei asking some nascent soul seniors be more helpful than us? Hee hee. City Lord Mei chuckled and said, I don't blame little friend Qin for having such a thought. This matter is indeed puzzling. Let me put it this way. The matter I want to do doesn't require a high cultivation level, and it doesn't require too many people. What I need is to ensure our survival and have as many opportunities as possible. That's why I'm asking all the core formation cultivators who have appeared in Starfall City to help me. It didn't require a high cultivation level, so he didn't need to invite nascent soul cultivators because the price of inviting a nascent soul cultivator was also very high. It didn't require too many people, so even if he was a city lord with countless subordinates, he wouldn't be able to use them. Mo Tiange somewhat understood. However, City Lord Mei just said it needed to ensure their survival. Could it be that this matter was very dangerous? City Lord Mei, please tell us the truth. We can't agree to your request. City Lord Mei seemed to have a good temperament. After Mo Tiange said that, he thought for a moment then said slowly, this matter. I'll have to explain it to you first. Little friends, in your opinion, how long is my lifespan? This question wasn't easy to answer. Mo Tiange could see that although City Lord Mei looked like a teenager, his lifespan was more than half over. However, some cultivators didn't like it when others called them old, especially when they looked young. Mo Tiange didn't know whether City Lord Mei had this taboo or not. City Lord Mei seemed to see their dilemma and said kindly, little friends, please speak frankly. There's no need to worry. Mo Tiange smiled and said, that being the case, City Lord Mei, please forgive me for speaking bluntly. The City Lord should be between 500 to 800 years old, right? Nia Wushang also nodded in agreement. City Lord Mei smiled and nodded. Correct. Little friends, you have good eyes. I formed my nascent soul when I was 500 years old. It's already been 300 years since then, so I'm 800 years old. The reason why I've maintained my youthful appearance is because I mistakenly ate a longevity fruit when I was young, causing my appearance to remain at the age of 15 for hundreds of years. Longevity fruit? Mo Tiange was a bit surprised. The longevity fruit was one of the main ingredients for longevity pills. If eaten alone, it could also increase one's lifespan, but it would trigger other effects. It seems City Lord May was young and ignorant that caused her to suffer. City Lord May heaved a long sigh and said, "I've lived for 800 years. Since I was 15, I've always maintained this appearance. In the beginning, I was complacent because I thought I could save a lot of look-preserving pills compared to other people. But later, as I grew older, I realized that growing older was also a fortunate thing. When this lord was young, I once had someone I loved, but that woman rejected me in the end because of my immature appearance." Mo Tiange saw that City Lord May's face was full of disappointment and frustration. Presumably, he was very fond of that woman in the past. 15 years old was indeed an awkward age. At this age, a man would start to understand the affairs of the heart, but he still hadn't fully grown up and couldn't be considered a man. No woman in this world would wish for their lover to remain at the age of 15 forever. At this age, he still didn't have broad shoulders. Moreover, even if she maintained her youthful appearance, being with him would be like being with her younger brother. After sighing for a while, City Lord May continued, "This matter is one of the greatest regrets of my life. Although my beloved has already turned into dust, I still can't let go of it. In the past 800 years, I've tried my best to restore my appearance, but unfortunately, I've never succeeded. In ancient records, there was a kind of spiritual fruit called the heavenly god fruit. This fruit wasn't too miraculous in terms of cultivation, but it could remove the poison caused by eating spiritual plants. I've been searching for it for several hundred years, but I've never seen it. It's as if this fruit has disappeared for a very long time and no longer exists in this world. However, a few days ago, I made a discovery." At this point, City Lord May's eyes shone with hope. "A few days ago, I discovered a secret place on Mount Starfall. I don't know its origin, but it might be an ancient ruin. Once you enter the ruins, you'll be given a test. If you pass the test, you'll be rewarded with a heavenly god fruit." Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang were stunned. If what City Lord May said was true, it was no wonder that so many core formation cultivators hadn't left. This kind of secret place was hard to find. If City Lord May gave them the opportunity to enter, even if they couldn't obtain the heavenly god fruit, they would still have a chance to obtain other treasures. This was a rare opportunity. Chapter 395. In front of a nascent soul cultivator, it wasn't convenient for the two of them to use voice transmissions. However, this was a serious matter, so they couldn't make a decision in a short time. Both Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang remained silent as they pondered. City Lord May wasn't in a hurry. She just sat there and watched them with a smile. Mo Tiange pondered for a while and felt it was better to discuss this matter first. She didn't have much desire for treasures, and she didn't know the ins and outs of this mysterious place. It was too risky to casually enter an ancient secret place. Who knew if there were any inside stories? As for Nia Wushang, she was trustworthy and very strong. If the two of them joined hands, it would be safer. With this thought in mind, she said, "City Lord May, Jr. just passed by Starfall City this time and came to take a look. I've already made an appointment with a friend to meet in a few months." "This, little friend Sheen, rest assured," City Lord May said, "this matter will be over in a month at most. You can leave then." City Lord May, Nia Wushang continued to ask, "What's the inside story of this secret place you mentioned? Will it be life-threatening? You can get a reward if you pass, but what if you can't? In addition, if you find the heavenly god fruit, what will you give in exchange? If you can't find it, what will you do?" Mo Tiange's previous words were evasive. It seemed she didn't really want to go to this secret place, but Nia Wushang's series of questions showed that she was seriously considering the feasibility of entering this secret place. City Lord May was overjoyed and said, "As long as you agree to go to this secret place, I'll do my best to help you. If you find the heavenly god fruit, I'm willing to give you a spiritual treasure in exchange. You can ask for it. If you don't, you can also choose some from my collection. As for this secret place, I can tell you the truth. This place should be a test left behind from the distant past era. Its mechanisms won't endanger your lives. Of course, if you enter with others, you must be careful of others plotting against you." Nia Wushang thought for a while, then asked, "City Lord, did you invite so many core formation fellow Taoists because this secret place is only for core formation cultivators? Moreover, each person can only enter once?" "Correct," City Lord May said. "After I discovered this secret place, I already went inside to explore. I am a nascent soul cultivator, so I triggered the test of the nascent soul stage. In ancient times, the magical powers of the nascent soul cultivators were exceedingly powerful. How could the cultivators of today compare? Without a doubt, I didn't pass." Later on, he ordered his subordinates to send in cultivators of various cultivation levels to explore, but all of them failed. Actually, a foundation building cultivator can also enter, and the power of the explosion won't be too strong. However, the rewards for a foundation building cultivator aren't very rich, and there's no heavenly god fruit either. I have no choice but to ask the core formation cultivators passing by Descending Star City for help. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows and asked, "City Lord May, didn't this matter leak out? If it's an ancient mystic land, I'm sure many fellow Taoists would be willing to go." City Lord May hesitated for a moment before calmly replying, "I've also thought about this matter. Many core formation cultivators have visited recently, and they aren't foundation establishment cultivators that can be casually dealt with. This news won't be able to be concealed for long. My Descending Star City isn't big and isn't considered powerful among the 7 minor demon regions of the Northern Unicorn Kingdom. If the other demon regions, or the major sects of the East Tang or South Zhou Kingdom wish to enter this secret place, I won't be able to stop them. By then, it's still unknown if we can exchange for the God of Heaven fruit from their hands. That's why I have to hurry up and get my hands on the heavenly god fruit while they haven't decided yet." Mo Tiange nodded in agreement. Although the heavenly god fruit didn't have any miraculous effects, it was an ancient item after all. If it could detoxify the remaining poison in spiritual plants, those major sects would most likely want to preserve it. "Little friends," City Lord May said, "I can't let you have a look at my treasures right now, but I can guarantee that they're definitely treasures that you core formation cultivators yearn for even in your dreams. As long as you agree to enter and give it a try, even if you can't obtain the heavenly god fruit, I'll still give you some benefits." For core formation cultivators, the treasures of a nascent soul cultivator were naturally rare treasures. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang didn't doubt this point. Junior naturally believes City Lord May, Nia Wushang said. "However, it'll be very difficult to pass this secret place, right?" "Of course," City Lord May admitted, "you have to be mentally prepared. This is an ancient mystic land, and the test for core formation cultivators is very difficult. You might not even be able to pass the first test." Mo Tiange was aware of this point. Before she formed her gold core, Xianqing School discovered that there was a hidden 10,000 laws of nature formation in Mount Taikong. It was similar to this mystic land and was also an ancient trial ground. City Lord May wasn't lying. Once City Lord May finished speaking, Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang exchanged glances. They saw the same message in each other's eyes. Mo Tiange tacitly understood. She turned towards City Lord May and said with a smile, "This matter is very important. Junior has to think about it." "I wonder." "Oh, of course," City Lord May said, "Little friend, you can stay in the manor for the time being and think about it carefully." Nia Wushang also said, "Junior too. I hope City Lord May can make things easier for us." "Of course." City Lord May smiled. "If the two of you have decided, I'll have someone take you to rest. What do you think?" "That's great. Thank you for your trouble, City Lord." City Lord May clapped her hands to summon a maid and ordered, "Take these two little friends to Fenghe Courtyard." Treat them well and make sure they're satisfied. The maid bowed. Yes, city lord. She then respectfully saluted the two of them and said, Seniors, please follow me. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang stood up, cupped their fists towards City Lord Mei and followed the maid out. A moment later, the maid led the two of them into a courtyard. The courtyard was small and exquisite. It had winding corridors, a clear pond, and pink lotuses in the pond, which made it look like a beautiful pavilion. In the courtyard's small hall, there was a plaque with 4 words, Crooked Courtyard, Fenghe Courtyard. Mo Tiange thought to herself. She really couldn't tell that this city Lord Mei was actually an elegant person. Moreover, there were restrictions laid in the courtyard, which blocked the devil aura, making the small courtyard look exceptionally elegant. After leading the two of them into the courtyard, the maid said, This is Fenghe Courtyard. Both of you are seniors cultivating, so it's very suitable for you to stay here. This is the east wing, and this is the west wing. Seniors can choose whichever one you want to stay in. I'll send someone to serve you later. While Mo Tiange was still looking around, Nia Wushang said, There's no need to serve us. We like peace and quiet the most. If there's anything, just call us. If there's nothing, there's no need to disturb us. Yes. This request was very normal for cultivators, so the maid bent her knees and respectfully retreated. Once the maid left the courtyard, the two of them immediately took action. They checked the surroundings to see if there were any prying restrictions. Once they confirmed there were none, Mo Tiange made a slight move, laying a restriction that could block divine sense. Then she and Nia Wushang sat by the pond. Fellow Daoist Nia, what do you think? Mo Tiange asked first. She could tell Nia Wushang was inclined to go to the secret place, but she didn't know what she was planning. I think we can give it a try, Nia Wushang said as expected. She took off her bamboo hat and pulled down her scarf to get some fresh air. Then, she suddenly asked an unrelated question, Do you think City Lord Mei saw through my disguise? Mo Tiange was stunned. I don't know. He's a nascent soul cultivator, so it's not strange for him to see through you. Besides, since he didn't say anything, it means he doesn't care. What does it matter if you're pretending or not? You're right. Nia Wushang sighed and said, I'm most afraid of meeting high-level cultivators. If they're curious, they can just sweep me with their divine sense, and I won't be able to hide any secrets. At the very least, the secret that she was a woman couldn't be concealed. Mo Tiange was distressed. If she didn't have the spirit-concealing pendant, she would be in even more danger than Nia Wushang. Besides, even if she had the spirit-concealing pendant, it wasn't completely foolproof. For example, Ling Yunhe and Black Moon Devil Monarch used other methods to detect that she was concealing her cultivation level. After all, there aren't many high-level cultivators. Besides, they wouldn't casually sweep around with their divine sense for no reason. Even if they found out, it had nothing to do with them, so they wouldn't say anything. Yeah, that's good. Nia Wushang wiped her face then continued with the original topic. Why do I see that you don't seem very interested? If what City Lord Mei said is true, this is a rare opportunity. Mo Tiange smiled. You got a lot of treasures from your master, right? Do you still need to be tempted by what City Lord Mei said? Nia Wushang was stunned. She shrugged helplessly and said, Yes, when I defected, I practically swept away all of Master's belongings outside. In any case, I've already done it. Even if I didn't take anything, he still wouldn't let me off if he caught me, so I might as well do it a bit more straightforwardly. However, the primordial devil aura in my body hasn't been resolved. This City Lord Mei is a cultivator of the devil path, so maybe there are 1 or 2 related treasures in his collection. It'd be good if I could get my hands on them. What she said made sense. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment then said with a smile, You're saying this kind of thing to me? Aren't you afraid I'll be greedy? Nia Wushang cast a glance at her, but she didn't seem to care at all. If it was before, I really would have been afraid, but now, I'm not. You're someone with great ambitions. If you want to achieve Tao and become an immortal, you can't relax your mental state. How could you neglect your roots and pursue trifles? She then said with a smile, besides, although you look smart and calm, you're actually a bit pedantic inside. If others offend you, you won't be polite, but if they're polite, you'll also be somewhat polite. To deal with people like you have to be so good that you can't let go of your feelings, right? Mo Tiange stared at the sky, speechless. Ling Yunhe told her that, and now even Nia Wushang said the same thing. Was her personality that obvious? However, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was precisely because they saw through her personality that Ling Yunhe and Nia Wushang dared to trust her. In the cultivation world, it was quite rare to have someone you could trust. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange sighed. Alas, if you want to achieve Dao and become an immortal, you'll have more restrictions than others. Of course. Nia Wushang said without hesitation, if you want more, you have to pay more. This is a very fair thing. Mo Tiange also understood this. However, judging from Nia Wushang's tone, she seemed to have made up her mind to walk on the path to becoming an immortal. This was actually a good thing. In the future, she would have someone to talk to about this matter with. When she was in the celestial pole, among the people who had a good relationship with her, Luo Fengxue regained her power. Yi Jingwen liked to fight, and although Qin Shi had a firm Dao heart like her, his realm was higher than hers, so it was usually Qin Shi who gave her pointers instead of discussing things with her. In fact, the so-called Dao heart will become natural once it's cultivated to a certain realm. From this aspect, it's not necessarily painful because at that time, it'll already become a person's heart. Just like you now? Nia Wushang asked. I've always felt that you don't seem to have the common greed of cultivators. Is it because you're restricted too much that this kind of desire will naturally disappear? About that. Chapter 396. The two of them chatted for a while, straying far from the topic. In the end, they reluctantly said they'd think about it for 2 days since this matter wasn't urgent. Then they began to divide the loot. Although they didn't get anything good from their trip to Carefree Valley, Ling Yunhe gave Tian Jiqian and Ling Yunfei's Qinkuan bags to them after they betrayed them and were killed at the last moment to show their gratitude. Both of them were disciples of big sects and were quite rich, so Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang benefited a lot. The two of them discussed and decided to divide spirit stones, spiritual pills, and some magic weapons and ancient books they needed. Mo Tiange naturally chose Tian Jiqian. Not to mention his character, his attainments in formations were indeed extraordinary. If it weren't for the fact that he had no expertise other than formations, he would be a very difficult opponent. Unfortunately, perhaps because he was used to standing behind Ling Yunhe, he didn't have any means to fight. After dividing the loot, the two of them went to study cultivation techniques and meditate. 2 days later, when they had just regained their spirits, someone asked to see them outside the courtyard. They thought it was City Lord Mei, but when they asked, it was another cultivator invited by City Lord Mei. Nia Wushang was inclined to agree to City Lord Mei's request, while Mo Tiange was indifferent. However, both of them thought it was better not to jump to conclusions. After all, they only heard about this matter from City Lord Mei and knew very little about it. Now that another cultivator came to their door, it was good. Fellow Taoists, nice to meet you. Mo Tiange blinked and said in surprise, Fellow Taoist Yong, fellow Taoist Qiu, it's you? These two people were Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua, whom she met once in Sky Snow City. Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua finally recognized her and looked surprised. You're fellow Taoist Qin. Mo Tiange nodded at them and said with a smile, I didn't expect we'd meet again in Starfall City so soon after we parted in Sky Snow City. Fellow Taoists and I are really fated. Exactly. Qiu Qingrua answered first and looked at Nia Wushang curiously. Fellow Taoist Qin, this is my friend. His nickname is Tian Can, Mo Tiange introduced. With a flat attitude, Nia Wushang nodded at them and said, Nice to meet you. So it's Taoist Tian Can. Upon hearing Mo Tiange's introduction, Qiu Qingrua looked a bit disappointed, but he concealed it very well and immediately greeted her enthusiastically. Yong Ryu's attitude, on the other hand, was much more normal. She smiled and nodded at Nya Wushang in greeting. She was neither rude nor overly enthusiastic. Mo Tiange felt both helpless and amused. This Qiu Qingrua still hadn't changed a bit. He still guarded against other women as if they were thieves. Fortunately, Nya Wushang was now dressed as a man. Otherwise, she would have definitely dragged Yong Ryu back, right? Fellow Taoist Tian Can, I met these two Taoists once in Heavenly Snow City. This is fellow Taoist Yong, and this is fellow Taoist Qiu. The two of them are cultivators from one of Eastern Tang's 5 great sects, the Dawning Pills sect. After they finished greeting each other, Mo Tiange politely invited Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua into the hall. Fellow Taoist Qin, what a coincidence. You also came to Descending Star City? Qiu Qingrua asked right after they sat down. Mo Tiange smiled and answered, after we parted ways that day, I happened to meet fellow Taoist Tian Can in Heavenly Snow City. We were very happy to meet again in a foreign place, so we decided to travel together. Originally, we had some matters to take care of in the vicinity, but unexpectedly, we were invited by the city lord as soon as we entered Descending Star City. May I know what happened to the two of you? We're more or less the same, Yong Ryu said. Junior Marshal's sister and I came here to travel, so we didn't have a specific purpose. We came all the way from Heavenly Snow City to Descending Star City without thinking too much. Right after we entered Descending Star City, we were invited to the city lord's mansion by Castellan May. Mo Tiange's gaze changed. That means we came to the city lord's mansion for the same reason? That should be correct. Once she finished speaking, the four of them exchanged glances with each other. Soon after, Mo Tiange smiled and said, fellow Taoists, after we parted ways in Sky Snow City, we met again in Starfall City. Moreover, we're also gathered together because of one matter, it can be considered fate. Moreover, we're both Tao cultivators, so we're a bit closer than other people. There are some things I have to say frankly. She paused for a moment. Seeing that Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were smiling and didn't seem to have any objections, she directly asked, fellow Taoists, what do you think about Castellan May's invitation? Have you agreed? Once Mo Tiange finished speaking, Qiu Qingrua immediately turned to look at Yong Ryu. Although she controlled everything, she always put Yong Ryu first when it came to official matters. Yong Ryu pondered for a while, then looked at Mo Tiange and Nya Wushang. She said, fellow Taoist Qin is so frank, so I can't hide it from you. Yes, Junior Marshal's sister and I have already agreed to Castellan May's request. Nya Wushang frowned and said, fellow Taoists, aren't you afraid there's more to this? Upon hearing this question, Qiu Qingrua covered her mouth and smiled. Fellow Taoist Tian Can, you and fellow Taoist Qin really have a telepathic connection. Your cautiousness is really similar. The ridicule in his words was very obvious. Mo Tiange felt helpless and said sternly, fellow Taoist Qiu, in fact, I already have a Tao companion. Although you were just joking, please don't say such things in the future. Qiu Qingrua was a bit surprised, but soon after, her expression turned serious and she solemnly saluted. I'm sorry, I offended you before. I hope fellow Taoist Qin won't take it to heart. Mo Tiange smiled and waved her hand, indicating she didn't mind. It was better to say things like this so this woman wouldn't always treat her as an imaginary enemy and try every possible way to remind her senior martial brother if he said one or two more words to him. Usually, it was fine, but when they were talking about official matters, this kind of behavior was really an eyesore. Fellow Taoists, aren't you afraid there's more to what Castellan May said? Nya Wushang asked again. Yong Ryu smiled and said, fellow Taoist Tian Can, no matter what, Junior Marshal's sister and I are disciples of a big cultivation group. Moreover, we're both core formation cultivators. We're not foundation building disciples whose cultivation groups won't care about us even if they disappear. Although Castellan May is the lord of a city, he can't afford to offend my Danxia sect. That being the case, what's there to be afraid of? Mo Tiange wasn't surprised by this answer. In the past few days, she'd discovered that Yunzhong cultivators were a lot bolder. As for the reason, it might be because cultivators from different paths lived together and lived in harmony for tens of thousands of years. After Yong Ryu finished speaking, she looked at Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang's expressions, then continued to say, "Fellow Taoists, you still haven't made up your mind? In fact, as long as what Castellan May said is true, it'll be beneficial to us. Let's not talk about what we can obtain, but ancient secret places are really hard to find nowadays. If we can go in and take a test, it'll also be very beneficial to our strength. Maybe we'll learn some ancient divine abilities and have a sudden epiphany. At that time, our cultivation levels will advance by leaps and bounds. That'll be a very good thing." Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang were both stunned. Yes, what Yong Ryu said was absolutely correct. This was the biggest benefit. They really didn't expect that Yunzhong cultivators would actually have this kind of broad-mindedness. They could see the essence at a glance. The significance of this kind of ancient secret place wasn't to obtain any visible benefits, but rather to experience ancient divine abilities and comprehend the mysteries of heaven and earth. What's wrong? Fellow Taoists, don't you think so? Yong Ryu asked again, since the two of them didn't speak. Mo Tiange heaved a long sigh, then looked at Yong Ryu and said sternly, "No, what fellow Taoist Yong said is very reasonable. For cultivators like us, this is indeed the biggest benefit." Yong Ryu's expression relaxed and she said with a smile, "That being the case, why are you still hesitating?" Mo Tiange didn't answer immediately. She looked at Yong Ryu, then at Qiu Qingrua, then asked, "Why do you want me and fellow Taoist Tian Can to agree so much? Does this matter have something to do with you too?" Qiu Qingrua smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Qin, don't misunderstand. It's just that Starfall City is a devil's domain, and most of the people who come here are devil cultivators. There aren't many Tao cultivators. Fellow Taoists must have heard that this secret place is a place for training. It won't endanger your life, but if someone tries to kill you from behind, you have to be on guard." "I see." Mo Tiange nodded. "So you want us to be your companions?" Yong Ryu nodded with a smile. "Yes. Junior Marshal's sister and I originally came here with this idea, but after meeting you two, we felt we didn't need to think too much about it. Although we've only met fellow Taoist Qin once, fellow Taoist Qin is much more trustworthy than others." "I have to thank you for your trust," Mo Tiange said with a smile. "But fellow Taoist Tian Can and I don't know much about this matter, so we can't answer you for now." "That's easy." Qiu Qingrua was very enthusiastic. "Senior Marshal brother and I have been here for several days, so we've more or less understood this matter. We can tell you too in detail." "Is that so?" This was good news. Mo Tiange said, "Then I'll have to trouble you, fellow Taoist Qiu." Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua then told them one by one. As it turned out, this kind of secret place wasn't very secretive in Yunzhong. Although there weren't many of them, most cultivation groups knew about one or two, and some of them were in their hands to train their disciples. Because of that, the core formation cultivators invited by City Lord May didn't suspect anything and stayed. They all knew this kind of secret place was hard to find. In a few days, it would be known by all cultivation groups. At that time, they would have to spend a lot of effort to enter the secret place. It would be better for them to help City Lord May's group this time. The sooner they entered the secret place, the more benefits they could obtain. As for that secret place, they also asked the core formation cultivators in Descending Stars City to learn more about it. Although it was difficult to pass, the mysteries of the divine abilities inside were obvious. There were even some secret techniques of the devil path inside. For devil cultivators, this was very attractive. Because in the Middle Ages, there were many cultivators and very few devil cultivators, so when an ancient secret place was discovered, it was usually cultivators who benefited the most. However, this ancient secret place actually had secret techniques of the devil path. This was really too rare. After spending most of the day explaining the matter, Yong Ryu asked again, fellow Taoists, this is all we've asked about. What do you think? Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang glanced at each other then said, fellow Taoists, this is all we've asked about. What do you think? However, I still need to discuss this matter with fellow Taoist Tian Can. I'll give the two of you an answer after some time. How about it? Yong Ryu smiled. Of course. Since that's the case, Junior Marshal's sister and I will take our leave first. We don't have much time, so if you two fellow Taoists have made a decision, please reply as soon as possible. Chapter 397. After Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua left, Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang were silent for a long time. After a while, Nia Wushang suddenly asked, do you think they're trustworthy? Mo Tiange shook her head. I can't say for sure. I'm not familiar with them. Nia Wushang nodded, stroked her chin, and said, don't you think there's a big difference between Yinzhong and the celestial pole in some aspects? Mo Tiange was also thinking about this a moment ago. You're right. If cultivators in the celestial pole encountered such a good thing, they'd probably suspect the city Lord Mei has evil intentions, but cultivators in Yinzhong don't have that many concerns. Yes, they're not so wary of people, and their way of thinking is also much simpler. Nia Wushang thought for a long time and sighed. I originally thought we could give it a try, but seeing the attitude of these Yinzhong cultivators, I feel a bit uneasy. Mo Tiange pondered. But the problem is, even if we don't agree, will this city Lord Mei let us go? The two of them looked at each other and shook their heads. Although City Lord Mei was polite to them before, they didn't think she'd simply let them go. Even if the atmosphere in Yunzhong and the celestial pole were somewhat different, strength was respected. This was the unchanging iron rule of this world. They were only core formation cultivators and didn't show any background, but they made a different choice from other cultivators, so it was hard to guarantee that City Lord Mei wouldn't be suspicious. The two of them thought for a long time but couldn't come up with a good solution. They were rich, so the so-called benefits weren't very attractive to them. However, Nia Wushang wanted to find a way to eliminate primordial devil aura, while Mo Tiange was quite tempted by the mysteries of the distant past era divine power Yong Ryu mentioned. However, they were born in the celestial pole and had rough experiences, so they were much more vigilant toward people than cultivators in Yinzhong. They really didn't dare to trust people so easily. Let's go. After a long time, Nia Wushang said after some deliberation, if we don't go, we obviously have no way out. Mo Tiange pondered while nodding slowly. The problem now wasn't whether they should go or not, but if they didn't go, they couldn't leave. They were in Descending Star City, and City Lord Mei was a nascent soul cultivator. Although they had nothing to fear among the core formation cultivators, they were not arrogant enough to think that they could defeat a nascent soul cultivator. Moreover, the other party had the geographical advantage. Since we're going, are we going with those two? Nia Wushang asked. Mo Tiange thought for a moment then said, in terms of strength, we're a bit stronger than them. There's really nothing to be afraid of. Yes. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were both in the early stage of the core formation realm. Even though they came from a big sect and were stronger than ordinary cultivators, they were still not ordinary cultivators. Then it's decided? Mo Tiange stared at Nia Wushang. Nia Wushang nodded. That'll do. If that's the case, we'll have to prepare well. If we notice anything amiss, we'll leave immediately. Nia Wushang agreed. As long as they were out of Descending Star City, even if it was just out of the Chancellor's residence, they would have a chance to escape. With that settled, the two of them got busy. Mo Tiange went back to her room, laid a formation then entered the virtual sky world to rest and reorganize. She prepared everything and took the 3 spiritual beasts with her. As for Nia Wushang, her hand was slightly injured, but it wouldn't affect her fighting too much. When the two of them finished preparing, Mo Tiange asked a maid to bring Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua over. Fellow Daoist Qin, fellow Daoist Tian Can. Once the two of them came in, Yong Ryu said with a smile, have the two of you made a decision? Yes. Mo Tiange smiled and invited the two of them to sit in the hall. I've discussed it with fellow Daoist Tian Can. Since both of you think it's worth a try, we're also willing to go. That's good. Yong Ryu looked happy and clapped her hands. With two fellow Taoists accompanying us, we'll feel much more at ease. Same to you. The four of them chatted for a while before Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua said goodbye and left to go back to prepare. Before leaving, Qiu Qingrua held Mo Tiange's hand very intimately and said, "Fellow Daoist Qin, it's rare for us core formation female cultivators to meet sisters in the same realm as us. What's even rarer is that we're both Dao cultivators, so we presumably have a lot of common topics to talk about. If there's a chance, let's talk more." Mo Tiange smiled and answered politely, "Fellow Daoist Qiu, if you want to talk, feel free to visit me or ask someone to send a message." Qiu Qingrua was very happy to hear her answer. He said a lot more before leaving with Yong Ryu. After watching their figures disappear, Nia Wushang leaned against the moon cave door with her arms crossed. She raised her chin at Mo Tiange and said with some disgust, "Why are you so polite to that woman?" "That woman?" Mo Tiange was stunned but soon smiled. "You mean Qiu Qingrua? Who else could it be?" Nia Wushang curled her lips. "I really don't understand. Does she really think her senior martial brother is loved by everyone? She's a cultivator, but she's acting like a secular woman, guarding against other women like a thief. That being the case, what's the point of her cultivating?" After talking for a long time, Mo Tiange imitated her and leaned against the moon cave door, staring at her with a faint smile on her face. Nia Wushang couldn't help but touch her face. It was nothing. She was still wearing a veil, so cultivators in the same realm as her wouldn't be able to see through her. This made Nia Wushang a bit nervous. "What's wrong?" Mo Tiange stroked her chin and revealed an enigmatic smile. "Why do you dislike her so much?" "Because." Nia Wushang took off her bamboo hat and pulled off the veil underneath, feeling a bit annoyed. "Maybe it's because she's jealous. She has such good qualifications, but she's putting her mind on this kind of unimportant thing. It's simply a waste." Mo Tiange laughed and patted her forehead. "How do you know it's a waste for her to do this?" "Anyone with eyes can see it," Nia Wushang said gloomily. Mo Tiange looked at the sky then said, "In fact, if you think about it from another perspective, that fellow Daoist Yong doesn't seem like a stupid person. Why does he turn a blind eye to his junior martial sister's behavior?" Nia Wushang was stunned. This. Maybe he doesn't care? That's possible. But he obviously doesn't dislike it. Mo Tiange spread her hands. While looking at the veins on her palm, she said, "In other words, all of Qiu Qingrua's actions are in the hands of her senior martial brother, but that Yong Ryu is completely unaware of it. If it's not because he's particularly slow, then it's because he tacitly approves of his junior martial sister's actions." "So what?" "Nothing." Mo Tiange's gaze fell on Nia Wushang's face. She said faintly, "It's just that this is other people's lives. They themselves don't have any opinions about it, so why should we worry about them?" Nia Wushang's expression gradually softened. After a long time, she finally nodded. "You're right. It's their own business, it's not worthwhile for me to meddle in it." Mo Tiange smiled. "Besides, do you like that fellow Daoist Yong? What are you thinking?" Nia Wushang rolled her eyes at her. "I don't like Qiu Qingrua, but it has nothing to do with her man." "That's not what I meant," Mo Tiange said. Mo Tiange said, "Since both you and I don't like her, then Yong Ryu's conditions can't be considered too good. No matter what, Qiu Qingrua is a core formation female cultivator, and she's a disciple of a big cultivation group. Her cultivation level is pretty good, so presumably, her aptitude isn't bad either. She's also very beautiful. If she was a bit more utilitarian, she could have found a stronger Dao companion, but she didn't. From this point of view, don't you think she's more pleasing to the eye?" Nia Wushang didn't say anything for a long time. Mo Tiange smiled. There's definitely something about Qiu Qingrua that we don't like, but that doesn't mean she's wasting her life. Judging from her age, she shouldn't be more than 300 years old. Even if her aptitude is good, advancing to the core formation realm before 300 years old is still not easy. We only see her pestering her senior martial brother from time to time, but we don't see her working hard. Nia Wushang's expression slowly softened. After a long time, she finally nodded softly. You're right. I'm too self-righteous. Mo Tiange shook her head. We cultivators can naturally do whatever we want. Sometimes, we don't need to know whether a person is good or not. Since we don't like them, we just don't get close to them. However, if we think too much, it'll be easy for us to look down on others. Nia Wushang rubbed her brows and muttered, turns out there are still so many things in this world that I don't understand. Seeing her like this, Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. I really can't tell you're actually several decades older than me. Judging from your appearance, you're practically ignorant about the world. Nia Wushang curled her lips. How could I have the chance? Mo Tiange was a bit curious when she heard this question. Right, I haven't asked you yet. How did you become Master Song Feng's disciple? Nia Wushang was silent for a long time. When Mo Tiange thought she wouldn't answer, she finally heard Nia Wushang's low and hoarse voice. My mother is his wife. Mo Tiange was stunned. She almost thought she heard wrong. She thought for a moment then said in disbelief, so you're saying, he's actually your father? No. Nia Wushang's expression was cold. I'm not his child. In other words, I'm a bastard child my mother secretly gave birth to. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows. How could someone use such words to describe me and my mother? Nia Wushang saw her expression and smiled self-mockingly. Master has always said that about me since I was a child. Then. Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment then asked, what about your mother and your biological father? I don't know. They should be dead. Nia Wushang's tone was flat and indifferent. With Master's personality, my mother definitely wouldn't have survived after betraying him. As for that man, he also wouldn't have had a chance to live. I'm sorry, Mo Tiange said in a low voice. It's nothing. Nia Wushang shook her head and smiled bitterly. I should have told you that Master can't be considered a human, so he couldn't have had children. I don't know why he married my mother, but I know what kind of inhuman life my mother lived with him. So I understand very well why my mother fell in love with another man and gave birth to me, although I hate her for giving birth to me, Nia Wushang said faintly. Ever since I was young, Master treated me like that. He beat and scolded me at every turn, calling me a bastard child, but he also taught me to cultivate and made me work for him. I don't know what kind of mentality he had. Maybe torturing me like that gave him the thrill of revenge. Then, do you miss your mother? Nia Wushang was dazed for a long time. After a long time, she smiled and said, before I was 10 years old, I think. I told you, Master was too successful. He completely educated me into the person he wanted me to be. I was afraid of him, hated him, but I had no choice but to rely on him. I dreamed of leaving him, but after I escaped, I almost couldn't survive. She smiled self-mockingly. Unfortunately, I still disappointed him in the end. I'll live, and I'll live better than him. Chapter 398. Mo Tiange heaved a long sigh and patted Nia Wushang's shoulder, speechless. She knew Nia Wushang must have a sad story, but she didn't expect it to be like this. The man who was supposed to be her father raised her, tortured her, and took revenge on her with his hatred for her mother. She never saw her mother, and she didn't even have the child's admiration for her. She lived for more than 100 years without freedom, hope, or even thoughts. What kind of life was that? Mo Tiange found it hard to imagine. If it was said that she once had a bit of ill feelings towards Nia Wushang, at this moment, it had already disappeared without a trace. It wasn't because she sympathized with her, but because even if Nia Wushang made her unhappy, it wasn't from her heart. She recalled Nia Wushang once said the reason she could advance so quickly was because Master Song Feng used primordial devil aura to open up her meridians. This primordial devil aura would flare up every once in a while, and when it flared up, she would wish she was dead. Was this also one of the methods of torture? Will your primordial devil aura flare up soon? Mo Tianga's concerned tone stunned Nia Wushang for a moment. She said, "It hasn't flared up since I advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm. I feel the spiritual aura during my advancement suppressed the primordial devil aura in my meridians, so it probably won't flare up in the near future." That's good. Nia Wushang looked at her, wanting to say something but hesitating. Mo Tianga asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Nia Wushang hesitated for a long time and finally asked, "Do you think of me as a friend?" Mo Tianga raised her eyebrows and asked with a smile, "Otherwise, why would I go with you?" Nia Wushang was silent for a long time. After a long time, Mo Tianga heard her sigh. "I thought, a proud son of heaven like you wouldn't put people like me in your eyes and wouldn't understand, so that's how I look in Nia Wushang's eyes?" Mo Tianga laughed and said, "How did you know I was a proud son of heaven from the beginning?" Nia Wushang was stunned and said, "When I first saw you, you were only in the foundation building realm, but you were already Lord Daoist Jinghe's disciple. How could you not be?" Mo Tianga sighed and said, "What about before I built my foundation? I entered Xianqing school when I was 20 years old. At that time, I was already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. 20 years old and already at the 10th layer of Qi training. This kind of cultivation speed is considered outstanding among the elite disciples of the big sections." "You're right," Mo Tianga said, "but at that time, I was just a trash with 5 wasted spiritual roots. I had to rely on taking medicine to cultivate." She spoke very calmly, but Nia Wushang was astonished. How could that be possible? If you had such aptitude, how could Lord Daoist Jinghe have accepted you as his disciple? And how could you be so young? Mo Tianga chuckled and said, "My aptitude is abnormal. Before Master accepted me as his disciple, everyone, including myself, thought I had a waste spiritual root." Oh. Nia Wushang didn't delve too deeply into it. The cultivation world was very mysterious, and there were always a lot of strange things. Even though she was a core formation cultivator, she still couldn't completely understand them. With this thought in mind, she asked, "If that's the case, how did you spend those 20 years?" Mo Tianga looked down at her hands and slowly began to talk about her past. "I was born in the secular world. Before I was 7 years old, I was just an ordinary village girl." She briefly recounted her experiences as a teenager and hid the parts that were inconvenient to tell others. By the time she finished, almost an hour had already passed. After listening to her, Nia Wushang didn't say anything for a long time. No one knew what she was thinking. After a while, she finally sighed and said, "No wonder. No wonder you're so different from those disciples from big cultivation groups. There are even some places that I feel are very familiar." Mo Tianga smiled. "I didn't expect that the one favored by the heavens in my eyes would also have this kind of experience." Nia Wushang stared at her and said earnestly, "I really didn't expect it. I thought your life was smooth sailing. This kind of thinking wasn't strange." People who knew her identity and saw that she had an outstanding cultivation level at such a young age would most likely have this kind of thinking. In fact, those years of wandering from place to place were only a few short years in her long life of cultivation. The longer she cultivated, the less it was worth mentioning. However, the marks left on her life were much heavier than those several decades of smooth sailing. In the past, she couldn't get anything, so now that she got something, she knew how to cherish it. The important people in her life left one by one, so her heart gradually became stronger and she could calmly face those storms. Compared to those truly favored by the heavens, she experienced more life and death, separation, loss, and injustice, so she could be more open-minded when facing worldly affairs. That's why I said that in places you can't see, others are also experiencing the same life as you and growing up, even if that person seems very annoying. Why do you look like that? Mo Tiange touched her face. Why do you look like that? Mo Tiange touched her face. Nia Wushang sighed and looked up at the sky. I really underestimated other cultivators. I always thought my experience was complicated and my understanding was different from others, but I never thought that other people's experience might be even more complicated. Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. I'm not as unlucky as you. Although I lost my parents when I was young, I didn't lack people who loved me. That's what you said, but I didn't think as clearly as you did. Nia Wushang looked down at her hand. The injury on her left hand hadn't healed yet, and there were still black traces where the black water corroded. She wrapped her wound again, clenched her fist, looked up and said, after this matter is over, I've decided to travel around and experience the life of some ordinary cultivators. What about you? Do you want to go with me? Mo Tiange pondered for a while then said, let's talk about it later. I can't decide right now. She came to Yunzhong to travel, but she had a more important purpose. She could only be sure about this after she met Ling Yunhe. Nia Wushang didn't feel disappointed. She said with a smile, then let's talk about it later. At the very least, before we return to Sky Snow City, we can still do things together, right? Of course, Mo Tiange answered with a smile. Nia Wushang seemed to be a trustworthy person with extraordinary strength, so it would be a pleasure to be her companion. After the two of them finished talking, they asked a maid to inform City Lord Mei. In just a moment, City Lord Mei sent someone to invite them over. Little friends. City Lord Mei walked in with a smile in the same small hall where they first met. Both Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang stood up and saluted. City Lord Mei. City Lord Mei smiled. With one hand clasped behind her back, she gestured for them to sit down. This gesture was very mature, but he looked like a teenager and hadn't grown up yet, so it looked very uncoordinated. City Lord Mei sat on the host's seat and ordered someone to serve tea. She then said with a smile, I heard you two agreed to my request. I'm very happy. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows. I heard there are many core formation cultivators here. Why does City Lord Mei care so much about us? City Lord Mei looked at them then pointed at her own head and said with a smile, intuition. Intuition? Nia Wushang was confused. Hee. City Lord Mei's gaze fell on her. Her attitude was amiable. Fellow Daoist Tian Can, as a nascent soul cultivator, you naturally have some wonderful divine abilities. It's like sensing fate. Mo Tiange said with a smile, I wonder what Lord Mei sensed. Could it be that you sense we could pass the test? That's not it. Sensing isn't prophecy, City Lord Mei said with a smile. It's just that based on your words and actions, as well as my experience, I feel you two have a higher chance of passing the test this time. A nascent soul cultivator's vision was extraordinary. With just a cursory glance, she could already see that Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang's strength wasn't ordinary and that their chances of passing the test were slightly higher than those cultivators with ordinary strength. City Lord Mei's gaze swept over Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang before she said with a smile, from what I can see, your cultivation levels are extraordinary, your spiritual treasures aren't bad, and you don't look very old. Presumably, you have a master, right? Although there was no lack of self-reliant examples in the cultivation world, having a master was certainly much easier than individual cultivators. Most individual cultivators were low-level cultivators because their aptitudes were poor and foundation-building pills were hard to come by. Very few of them could advance to the foundation-building realm, and only 1 in 10,000 could form their gold core. Their chances were much lower than those of cultivation group disciples. Because cultivation wasn't easy, individual cultivators mostly looked old and experienced, even if they looked young. However, Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang weren't like this. Whether it was their appearance or their bearing, they didn't look like individual cultivators at first glance. Upon hearing this question, Mo Tiange only showed a faint smile and said, Junior indeed has a master, but it's inconvenient for me to say it. I hope Senior can forgive me. Nia Wushang said, I also have a master. City Lord Mei smiled and said, it seems you two young friends have extraordinary identities. I wasn't wrong about you. He paused for a moment then continued, since that's the case, I'll arrange for you two to enter the secret area to train together. City Lord Mei, Mo Tiange asked, can we enter the trial at any time? City Lord Mei shook her head and said, according to reason, the trial can be opened at any time. However, I won't hide this from you two. After discovering this secret area, I gathered the strength of all the core formation cultivators in Descending Stars City and laid a restriction to ensure that this place won't be discovered by outsiders for a short period of time. Opening this restriction isn't an easy matter, so I wanted to wait until the number of core formation cultivators reached a certain number before opening it. City Lord Mei's words were reasonable, so Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang both nodded. Then, when will City Lord Mei decide to open it? City Lord Mei said, if you two young friends decide to join, there will be more than 10 people. It can be opened in 2 or 3 days. All right. If you decide when to open it, I'll have to ask City Lord Mei to inform me. That's natural. City Lord Mei stood up and said, in a moment, I'll have Elder Liang explain in detail the matters you need to pay attention to. I hope you two can prepare well in the next few days. Of course. Since the master seemed to want to see them off, Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang both stood up. That being the case, we'll take our leave first. City Lord Mei smiled and said, young friends, please do as you wish. The two of them cupped their hands and bowed to City Lord Mei again, then left the small hall. Under the guidance of a maid, they returned to Fenghe Courtyard. When they entered Fenghe Courtyard and confirmed that no one could spy on them, Nia Wushang impatiently asked, do you think there's a problem? It's hard to say. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows. More than 10 core formation cultivators. It's too chaotic. He also reminded us that although this trial doesn't require our lives, other people can mount sneak attacks on us. I think we have to be careful with every step we take. Chapter 399. After a while, Elder Liang indeed came to Fenghe Courtyard. He explained in detail the obstacles they might encounter in the trial, provided some information, and gave each of them a puppet-shaped magic weapon before leaving. After seeing Elder Liang off, Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang played with a puppet each and didn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, Nia Wushang put down the puppet in her hand and said, they're quite well prepared. The puppet was only the size of a palm, but it was very delicate. There was a faint aura on it, but it wasn't devil aura or spiritual aura. Mo Tiange couldn't tell what it was. However, it was indeed a very good magic weapon. Elder Liang said the secret place was in Mount Starfall, and there were some poisonous creatures around it that would produce miasma. With this puppet, they could avoid the miasma and save spiritual aura. Yes. Mo Tiange looked at the puppet in her hand and frowned. Are we being too sensitive? The two of them were lost in thought. In fact, there was nothing particularly unreasonable about City Lord Mei's behavior. It was just that they were used to thinking from the negative side, so they felt there was no reason for such a good thing to happen to them. An ancient secret place invited by a nascent soul cultivator, and there was no danger to their lives. In the celestial pole, how could such a good thing be known to outsiders? Mo Tiange felt she was being too suspicious. This was Yunzhong, not the celestial pole. How could she know this kind of thing wasn't very common in Yunzhong? Besides, weren't those dozen or so core formation cultivators unsuspicious? Judging from Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingruo's behavior, Mo Tiange felt there was nothing suspicious about City Lord Mei's behavior. After pondering for a while, Mo Tiange said, let's do it as we see fit. Didn't we talk to Yong Ruyu and the others? We'll act together with them. If something goes wrong, we can use their behavior as a reference. Nia Wushang agreed. In any case, she couldn't figure out what to do about this matter, so she'd do it this way. Several days later, a maid came to Fenghe courtyard to invite them. This time, they didn't meet in the small hall where they met City Lord Mei, but in the main hall of the City Lord's mansion. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang finally met other cultivators. At first glance, there were a total of 15 cultivators gathered here. 10 of them were devil cultivators. Aside from the 2 of them, there were righteous Dao cultivators, Yong Ru, Yu Qiu, and Cheng Ruo. There was also an extremely reclusive green-robed swordsman. This person's cultivation was at the middle stage of core formation. He carried a long sword on his back that was faintly glowing. He had a very thin face and expressionlessly sat in the corner without saying a single word. Upon seeing Mo Tiange staring at that person, Qiu Chengrua approached her and whispered, "Fellow Daoist Qin, senior martial brother and I have been in contact with this person. He seems to be very wary of outsiders and refused our proposal." "Is that so?" Mo Tiange raised her brows. There were more than a dozen cultivators, most of whom were devil cultivators, but this person didn't want to travel with Yong Ruyu. Was it because of his eccentric personality, or because he was very confident in himself? As if sensing that someone was looking at him, the man turned his head, glanced at them, and nodded stiffly. He then turned his head back and continued to stare straight ahead expressionlessly. The 4 of them were somewhat speechless. Even Nia Wushang thought this person looked too aloof. It seemed he really didn't like to interact with others. "Forget it," Mo Tiange said, "maybe this fellow Daoist really has an eccentric personality and doesn't like to interact with others." "Fellow Daoist Qin is right," Yong Ruyu said, "since he doesn't want to travel with us, there's nothing we can do." The other 3 nodded and withdrew their gazes. "Fellow Daoist Qin." Qiu Chengrua looked at Mo Tiange and said with a smile, "It's been several days since we last met. Is the medicinal pill you wanted to concoct done?" Mo Tiange smiled. "It's done. If fellow Daoist Qiu doesn't have anything else to do, you can help me evaluate it." Qiu Chengrua waved his hand repeatedly. "I only have a rough understanding of the Tao of pill concocting, so I don't dare to evaluate it. I just want to see it for myself." Last time, when they were chatting, Qiu Chengrua accidentally learned that Mo Tiange also knew the Tao of pill concocting. He was very happy and said he also liked pill concocting very much, so he wanted to ask her for advice and so on. Although Mo Tiange didn't like to be close to people, she wouldn't refuse if others treated her kindly, so she agreed. Yong Ryu looked at the 2 of them with a smile and said, "Junior martial sister, you stay here with fellow Daoist Qin. I'll go to the side with fellow Daoist Tian Can and talk. We'll come back when City Lord Mei arrives." "All right, senior martial brother, you can go." Qiu Chengrua smiled at him, pulled Mo Tiange's hand, and sat down affectionately. Yong Ryu turned to Nia Wushang and said, "Fellow Daoist Tian Can, they can talk. Let's go over there and talk." Nia Wushang saw Mo Tiange nodding softly at her, so she said, "All right." She was now a man, so it wasn't good for her to stay here confidently. Besides, she might gain something by talking to Yong Ryu alone. Ever since he knew Mo Tiange already had a Dao companion, Qiu Chengrua's attitude became a lot more natural. Not only was he no longer guarded against her, but he also treated her very intimately. Mo Tiange felt that although Qiu Chengrua wasn't the same kind of person as her, her current behavior wasn't hateful. If she maintained this attitude, it wouldn't be a problem for them to befriend each other. After all, there were thousands of people in this world. How could she not befriend others just because they had different ideas? Even among friends, people had to seek common ground while reserving differences, tolerate disagreements with others, adjust their own pace, and look for things they liked about each other. Mo Tiange was startled when she realized she was thinking about this problem. She realized she seemed to have been thinking about the word friend a lot lately. Could it be that the better she got along with Nia Wushang, the more she felt she could have a few more friends? This wasn't impossible. In the past 100 years, she'd always been relatively unsociable. Aside from people like Luo Fengxue and Yi Jingwen who took the initiative to treat her, she never thought about making friends with others. In the past, she was busy cultivating and her cultivation level wasn't high enough, so she didn't dare to easily make friends. But now that she was a core formation cultivator, she didn't need to be like that. Fellow Taoist Qin. Upon hearing Qiu Qingrua's voice, Mo Tiange regained her train of thought. She said apologetically, "I'm sorry, I thought of a problem." So, Qiu Qingrua showed an understanding expression. He moved closer to her and asked, "Fellow Taoist Qin, are you thinking about your husband?" Mo Tiange was stunned, but she didn't deny it. Although she wasn't thinking about Qin Shi just now, she couldn't help but think about him every few days. On Demonic Mountain, she and Qin Shi made a blood oath to each other. Ever since they parted, she could sense Qin Shi's condition was very stable, so she wasn't too worried. Presumably, he was still in closed-door meditation, right? Upon seeing her expression, Qiu Qingrua covered her mouth and smiled. He then asked curiously, "I see fellow Taoist Qin's way of doing things is very natural and magnanimous. You really don't look like someone trapped in love. I wonder what kind of person your husband is to be able to make you fall in love with him." This question startled Mo Tiange. What kind of person was Qin Shi? How could he be explained in a few words? The more she spent time with him, the more she felt he was good. But it was inconvenient for her to talk about those good qualities to outsiders. He is a very considerate person. Although he doesn't like to talk, he cares about people in his heart. When I'm with him, I feel like I'm cherished and valued. Upon seeing Mo Tiange's smiling expression, Qiu Qingrua seemed to be thinking about something. "It seems you love your husband very much." Mo Tiange looked at him, puzzled. "Fellow Taoist Qiu, how can you tell?" Qiu Qingrua said, "Your expression can't deceive anyone. Thinking about him makes you feel very happy and happy." Mo Tiange recalled her mood just now and couldn't help but smile. Indeed, even just thinking about him made her feel very happy. Moreover, when you mentioned him, you didn't talk about his cultivation level or identity first, but about his personality first. The two of you must have become Tao companions because you love each other, right? You didn't become Tao companions because of an elder's order or because of cultivation between fellow disciples. At this point, Qiu Qingrua's gaze revealed a hint of depression. This puzzled Mo Tiange. "Fellow Taoist Qiu, what you're saying? Could it be?" Qiu Qingrua forced a smile. After a while, as if unwilling, she said, "My senior martial brother and I became Tao companions because of what Master said." Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows. "But looking at you two," Qiu Qingrua sighed softly and said, "Of course, since we become Tao companions, we naturally have feelings for each other." She looked at Mo Tiange with a complicated gaze. "In fact, I really envy you too. You're not martial brothers and sisters, and you don't have any interests in it." Mo Tiange was silent for a while. Looking at Qiu Qingrua's sad expression, she finally said, "My husband is also my senior martial brother." Qiu Qingrua was stunned and surprised. "Then you too, since we become Tao companions, what does it matter if we're martial brothers and sisters?" She said with a smile, "Fellow disciples naturally have more opportunities to get along and develop feelings than others. Isn't this very normal?" Qiu Qingrua answered softly. The depressed expression on her face faded a little, and she looked at Mo Tiange with a smile. Perhaps because of what they said just now, she became closer to Mo Tiange. Unlike before, although they were affectionate, they still carried a hint of politeness. "By the way, where's the medicinal pill fellow Taoist mentioned? I almost forgot about the important matter." Mo Tiange smiled and took out a jade bottle from her Qinkuan bag. She said, "The ingredients for this medicinal pill are too complicated. I failed several times before I succeeded in concocting this bottle." Qiu Qingrua took it, pulled out the cork, and poured out a medicinal pill. This medicinal pill was bluish-green in color and carried a refreshing fragrance. One whiff of it would make people feel energized. Qiu Qingrua first observed the medicinal pill's color, then sniffed its fragrance. In the end, he dipped his finger into the powder and tasted it. In the end, he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. Fellow Daoist Qin, I didn't expect your pill concocting skills to be so outstanding. This medicinal pill has almost no impurities. It's indeed of the highest quality. Mo Tiange smiled modestly. I'm just very interested in pill concocting. In terms of pill concocting skills, my senior martial brother is actually more outstanding. Really? Qiu Qingrua was surprised. Your pill concocting skills are already comparable to the best concoctions masters in my Danxia sect. Fellow Daoist Qiu, you praise me too much. Qiu Qingrua tasted the powder of the medicinal pill again, then poured it back reluctantly. He asked, Fellow Daoist Qin, this medicinal pill should be used to detoxify, right? What's it called? It's called Refreshing Breeze Jade Pills, Mo Tiange said. It's used to detoxify, but it can also be taken to guard against fog and the like. Really? Qiu Qingrua looked at the jade bottle in his hand, hesitated for a moment, then said, Fellow Daoist Qin, I want to exchange other things or spirit stones for your Refreshing Breeze Jade pills. What do you think? Mo Tiange muttered, this. Qiu Qingrua hastily added, rest assured, fellow Daoist Qin. I definitely won't take advantage of you. You can name your price. That's not what I meant. Mo Tiange said, to be honest, the success rate of this medicinal pill isn't high, and the ingredients are very complicated. I only managed to concoct this one bottle. Qiu Qingrua looked at the jade bottle in his hand, sighed, and handed it back to her. That being the case, I won't force you. However, if fellow Daoist Qin succeeds, please consider it. Of course. Mo Tiange nodded with a smile. The two of them continued to discuss pill concocting for a while. Although Qiu Qingrua's pill concocting skills weren't as good as hers, they weren't weak either. Some of his pill concocting techniques were unique to Yunzhong, so Mo Tiange benefited a lot from them. Just as they were happily chatting, they suddenly sensed a powerful aura coming from afar. In an instant, all the cultivators in the room quieted down. This kind of aura. City Lord Mei must have arrived. Chapter 400. Ha 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 ha. A hoarse and somewhat shrill voice rang out. Soon after, City Lord Mei walked in from the door and cupped her hands towards everyone with a smile on her face. Young friends, I've come late. Please forgive me. City Lord Mei looked like he was 15 years old. Not only did his appearance not mature, but even his voice was still changing. This City Lord Mei looked really young, but when he moved, everyone in the room was respectful, treating him as their leader, no matter what his background was. When facing a nascent soul cultivator or a core formation cultivator, they had to maintain the corresponding courtesy. This was true everywhere, and there was no exception. Once City Lord Mei finished speaking, all the core formation cultivators in the hall politely returned his greeting. Someone even answered, we wouldn't dare. City Lord Mei is a senior. We've only been waiting for a while, so how could we dare to take offense? City Lord Mei revealed a faint smile. Her gaze swept across the room, then she sat down on the master's seat. Seeing that everyone else was still standing, she said, everyone, please sit down. Upon hearing her words, the cultivators in the hall scattered and sat down. Mo Tiange and Qiu Qingrua sat nearby. Mia Wushang and Yong Ryu also returned to their sides and sat down. The hall was completely silent. Only the faint sound of City Lord Mei drinking tea could be heard. After a while, City Lord Mei put down her teacup, faced everyone and said loudly, young friends, I'm an impatient person. I presume everyone already knows why I've come here today. Of course. City Lord Mei, we're also impatient people. Please speak frankly. The one who spoke was a robust devil cultivator in the middle stage of the core formation realm. Once he spoke, the two early-stage devil cultivators next to him chimed in. Mo Tiange had noticed them before. These three people should be together. The robust devil cultivator was the leader while the other two called him Big Brother. Mo Tiange didn't know whether they were real brothers or sworn brothers. These three people's words and actions were very arrogant. When everyone gathered to talk just now, they repeatedly observed the Tao cultivators in front of them. Their gazes weren't very friendly. City Lord Mei faintly smiled and said, "Little friend Jean, sure, don't worry. I've invited you here. So, I'll explain everything clearly." He paused for a moment before he raised his voice and said, "Dear friends, all of you have been waiting in Descending Star City for a long time for the secret place to open. Some of you have even waited for more than a month. I would like to express my apologies for wasting your time. As of now, 15 core formation cultivators have agreed to my request and are willing to go to the hidden place. The number of people is enough. Since that's the case, I'll open the restriction of the secret place today and let all of you try it out. What do you think?" Most of the cultivators present were overjoyed when they got the exact news. The only reason they were willing to stay here was because of this ancient place. Or else why would these completion-leveled cultivators waste their time? Now that he had finally achieved his goal, there was no need for him to wait any longer. City Lord Mei was very satisfied when he saw everyone's expressions. He said, "I'm sure all of you have heard about the specific information about the hidden place from the elders of Descending Star City. I won't say much about it. I will only say two things about this trip to the hidden place. First, this hidden place is an ancient trial ground. Every trial will last for a maximum of 3 days. After that, all participants will be thrown out of the hidden place. Therefore, please make the best use of your time. Second, I don't care what kind of rewards you obtain during the trial. However, if you obtain the Heavenly God fruit, please hand it over. Otherwise, I will have my ways." City Lord Mei's eyes were filled with power as he swept his gaze across the crowd. Prior to this, City Lord Mei's attitude was kind and his words were polite. He didn't have the slightest arrogance of a nascent soul cultivator. It was only now that everyone realized that he was a genuine nascent soul cultivator. Seeing that everyone was silent out of fear, City Lord Mei laughed and said, "My friends, there is no need to be so nervous. It doesn't matter if you succeed or not. As long as you leave the hidden place, I will give you a small reward for your hard work. Even though you are all core formation cultivators and don't think much of it, it is still a small token of my appreciation." Hee hee. The strong demonic cultivator from before spoke first. He laughed and said, "City Lord Mei is too polite. You allowed us to enter the hidden place. What other requests do we have?" This time, City Lord Mei only smiled and didn't reply. She said, "All right, my friends, I'm sure everyone is impatient. Let's not waste any more time. Let's depart." Then, City Lord Mei stood up and led the way out of the hall. She waved her sleeve and stepped onto her flying magic treasure. Once everyone was out of the hall, they followed City Lord Mei and turned into rays of light that chased after them. At this moment, the idle cultivators of Descending Star City noticed a rare sight. In the sky above Descending Star City, more than 20 rays of light flew past. They were of different colors. It looked as if all the core formation cultivators of Descending Star City had gathered together. Hey, everyone, look at the sky." A cultivator who wanted to see the world in chaos shouted, "There are so many core formation cultivators. What are they doing?" Hearing his voice, people came out from the streets and shops to look up. Ah, it's true. There are so many people. Did all the core formation cultivators of Descending Star City move out? Are they fighting? Maybe they found some treasure and are fighting with people from other demon territories. TSK, so many core formation cultivators. How impressive, yeah, when can I also form my gold core and show off? The core formation cultivators flying in the sky naturally couldn't hear these low-level cultivators' envious words. They were focused on following City Lord Mei to the secret place. After leaving Descending Star City and entering Mount Xinglua, which was also known as Mount Jialing in eastern Tang, Mo Tiange felt the devil aura was getting thinner and thinner. Gradually, they went deeper into the mountain range. The fog was everywhere, so she couldn't tell where they were going. Fellow Daoist Imo, after flying for a while, Nia Wushang whispered to her, "Do you remember the way you came?" Mo Tiange tried to recall, but she was shocked. "I can't remember clearly." The memory of cultivators was much better than that of mortals. They could easily remember an event that happened several decades ago or a person they met. Mo Tiange had never experienced this kind of situation where she couldn't clearly remember the path she had just taken. She carefully recalled. She felt she could remember everything clearly after leaving the city, but after entering the fog, she could only remember a few rough turns. She couldn't remember exactly how far she flew. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange looked at Nia Wushang. Both of their foreheads were covered in cold sweat. There was definitely something wrong with that fog, but she didn't know whether the others had discovered it or not. At this time, City Lord Mei, who was flying in the front, suddenly turned around and said, "Little friends, this is Descending Star City's bewildering trace fog. Aside from being bewildering, it doesn't have any other harmful effects, so you don't need to worry." Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang glanced at each other. They both saw vigilance in each other's eyes. City Lord Mei was a nascent soul cultivator, one realm higher than them. He must have heard their secret voice transmission just now, so he deliberately turned around to explain. But his behavior, in the eyes of the two of them, made them even more vigilant. In a situation where City Lord Mei was present, it was actually impossible for them to communicate alone. The two of them couldn't communicate, so they could only ponder on their own. Mo Tiange calmed down and slowly pondered. She had always been used to doing things alone. Now, she could just assume that Nia Wushang wasn't present and make her own decisions. In any case, ever since she got to know Nia Wushang, the two of them behaved very similarly, so presumably, there shouldn't be too much of a difference. They were now in the bewildering trace fog and City Lord Mei was leading the way in front of them, so escaping was unwise. That being the case, she could only be patient and calmly observe the situation. In any case, aside from City Lord Mei's own subordinates, there were 15 core formation cultivators here. Presumably, he wouldn't be able to deal with them as he pleased. With this thought in mind, Mo Tiange's heart calmed down a bit. She looked at Nia Wushang again, and the latter also gave her a meaningful glance. The two of them smiled at each other and, with a tacit understanding, continued to hurry on with their journey. The dense fog dispersed after a while. City Lord Mei was the first to stop in midair. She then said in a loud voice, "Everyone, we've arrived. This is the secret area. There's a miasma below. Please take out the wooden puppets that I've given you." Upon hearing what she said, the other cultivators took out their puppets one after another and began to wear them. Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment. She glanced at Nia Wushang and shook her head. She then took out the Tai Chi 8 trigrams from her Qingquan bag and put it in her sleeve, signaling Nia Wushang to come closer to her. The Tai Chi 8 trigrams had the function of stabilizing yin, yang, and the 5 elements. In addition, she had already given Nia Wushang Cool Breeze Jade Dew pills, so it shouldn't be a problem for her to prevent this small miasma. They didn't move for a long time. In the end, City Lord Mei still glanced at them. Fortunately, she didn't pay too much attention to them because there were also other cultivators who had other methods and didn't use those puppets. This wasn't strange at all. Which core formation cultivator didn't have a few secret techniques? Preventing miasma, such a small matter naturally wouldn't pose a problem to them. However, everyone had their own preferences, so they chose the puppets they provided without much certainty. "Everyone, are you ready? Let's go down now," City Lord Mei said, then turned into a flight light and swiftly descended. The means of a nascent soul cultivator was undoubtedly revealed. Soon after, the several Starfall City elders she brought with her also descended. Upon seeing this, the others also followed closely behind them. When everyone stopped, Mo Tiange raised her head to take a look. This place was a small canyon. The mountain wasn't steep, and the terrain wasn't dangerous. The passages on both sides were very wide, and there didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. The place they stopped at was a small highland above the canyon. Behind them was a slightly higher cliff, and in front of them was a slightly lower basin. There was neither devil aura nor spiritual aura in this place, so there shouldn't be any spirit veins here. The distant past era's secret place was actually in this kind of place? However, this wasn't impossible. The distant past era was different from the current era. Perhaps spirit veins had already disappeared with the vicissitudes of time. My young friends, City Lord May turned around and said with a smile, "This is the secret place that I was talking about. From now on, I and several elders will use our secret technique to open the restriction. Young friends, hurry up." City Lord May didn't waste time and called the several Starfall City elders over. With him as the center, a total of 6 people walked down the canyon until they finally stopped in the middle of the basin. Soon after, City Lord May gave an order, and under his lead, a core formation cultivator used their secret technique. Immediately, 6 rays of light shone and pierced the sky. Chapter 401. When the light dispersed, a whirlwind suddenly rose inside the small canyon. This whirlwind wasn't big, so it wasn't even worth mentioning to the core formation cultivators. However, the aura coming from the whirlwind made everyone's expressions change. Aura. This was the aura of the distant past era. Although the core formation cultivators hadn't entered the distant past era's secret land, they weren't ignorant people. This desolate and distant aura was definitely something left behind by the distant past era. Now, everyone believed that there was a distant past era's secret land here. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang glanced at each other. Both of them relaxed a bit. This aura couldn't be faked, so City Lord May's words became a bit more believable. When the whirlwind settled down a bit, a hexagram formation appeared in the center of the basin. When Mo Tiange saw it, she felt even more assured. With her attainments and formations, she could naturally see that this formation was a genuine distant past era formation. "Little friends," City Lord May said loudly, "please come here." The core formation cultivators on the plateau hesitated for a bit, but some of them stepped forward and walked down. Seeing that someone was moving, the others hesitated for a bit before they also followed. After everyone entered the basin, City Lord May said, "I found this transporting formation here. Once you enter the transporting formation, you'll be transported randomly. Therefore, little friends who have decided to move together, please enter the transporting formation together." Right, this formation can transport up to 5 people at a time. The elders should have told you about this, right? Upon hearing what she said, more than 10 core formation cultivators moved and stood together with their companions. City Lord May swept her gaze over everyone and revealed a smile. "Alright, let's begin." For a moment, everyone was in a wait-and-see state. Everyone had a herd mentality. Very few people were willing to be the first to take the lead, even if they were cultivators. They all wanted to enter the secret land, but in the end, would there be other dangers in the secret land? This was something they couldn't be sure about. After a while, someone finally stepped forward. "Senior May, us 3 brothers will go first." It was the rather arrogant and burly cultivator from before. City Lord May smiled and said, "Little friend Jinshur is willing to go first, so there's naturally no problem. The 3 of you just need to step forward." With the burly cultivator leading the way, the 3 devil cultivators stepped onto the teleportation array. Suddenly, the teleportation array lit up, surrounding the 3 of them. The light grew brighter and brighter, and in a flash, the 3 of them disappeared into the teleportation array. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows. Judging from the technique used to set up this teleportation formation and the way it was being teleported, it should be an ancient spirit diagram. However, the teleportation speed was a little slow, and it seemed like it lacked spirit energy. Could it be that the spiritual energy supporting this secret place was running out? If that was the case, would the secret place still be complete? She looked at City Lord May and the elders of Descending Star City. Their expressions were calm and they did not seem to have noticed this problem. After thinking for a moment, she shook her head. "Forget it, no matter what, the teleportation array can be activated, and the spiritual energy in this secret place should be able to last for a while, right? It was better to let the future generations worry about this problem. As he thought about this, more and more people stepped onto the transportation formation. Of the 15 core formation cultivators, only 7 remained. Aside from the 3 burly devil cultivators, most of the others moved alone or in pairs. There were very few people who moved in groups of 4. After the green-robed swordsman stepped onto the teleportation array alone, Yong Ryu said, "Fellow Taoists, should we also go?" Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang both nodded, indicating they had no objections. The 4 of them stepped onto the teleportation array together. A moment later, the light dispersed. When the 4 of them saw their surroundings, they were shocked. The cold wind whimpered around them, and the messy snow blinded their eyes. They were actually in a snowstorm. Upon discovering this, Mo Tiange immediately waved her sleeves. With the help of the Tai Chi 8 diagrams, the spiritual aura fluctuated, sweeping away the cold wind and snow in the surroundings, creating a clean space around the 4 of them. Soon after, the 4 of them looked up and were even more shocked than before. As far as their eyes could see, there was a boundless ice field with no end in sight. Icebergs stood in great numbers around them, and the ice was abrupt. The environment was dangerous. Standing on the ice field, the 4 of them looked like 4 little ants. In the snowstorm that filled the sky, they were so insignificant that they were almost not worth mentioning. "What's going on?" Chiu Qingrua was the first to shout while looking at Yong Ryu. Yong Ryu frowned, seemingly also uncertain. She looked at Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang. "Fellow Taoists, in your opinion, this kind of topic was naturally answered by Mo Tiange. While releasing her divine sense to explore, she said, "An illusory formation." This was almost nonsense. They entered the ancient secret land through a teleportation array. Since this secret land was for the purpose of training, the unreasonable scene in front of them was naturally an illusory formation. However, the problem was that although everyone knew it was an illusory formation, they couldn't see any trace of it. "Fellow Taoist Qin, what should we do?" Nia Wushang asked. Mo Tiange didn't answer. She took out the Tai Chi 8 diagrams from her sleeve, shook her sleeve, and the Tai Chi 8 diagrams unfolded out of thin air. The Tai Chi 8 diagrams on the picture were dazzling. Upon seeing this picture, Yong Ryu and Chiu Qingrua's eyes lit up. They were disciples of a big cultivation group, so their eyes didn't need to be mentioned. They could tell at a glance that this Tai Chi 8 diagrams was a top-grade magic weapon. Mo Tiange looked at the flow of the Tai Chi 8 diagrams on the picture, then closed her eyes to sense the 5 elements and yin and yang around her. After a while, she opened her eyes and said, "Yes, it's indeed an illusory formation." Seeing how certain she was, Yong Ryu looked happy and asked, "Fellow Taoist Qin, you can see it?" Mo Tiange smiled, put away the Tai Chi 8 diagrams and said, "Fellow Taoist Yong, don't have too much hope. I can indeed see that this is an illusory formation, but this formation is very clever. I have no idea how to break it." Yong Ryu waved her hand and said, "Since it's an ancient place for training, it's normal that fellow Taoist Qin can't break it in a short time. If you can figure out the key to breaking it with just a glance, then your attainments in formations would be too amazing." Mo Tiange couldn't help but smile. What Yong Ryu said was right. Even if she knew some ancient formations and even Xuanji formation books, she was a cultivator of the present, not someone from the Middle Ages. How could she break the formation in a short time? She was the one who asked too much of herself. "Then what should we do now?" Chiu Qingrua looked worried. "We only have 3 days. Senior Marshal Brother and I don't know much about formations, so I'm afraid we won't be able to help. What about fellow Taoist Tian Kan? Does he know anything about formations?" Nia Wushang shook her head silently. Chiu Qingrua sighed. "Doesn't that mean we can only rely on fellow Taoist Qin alone?" "Fellow Taoist Chiu, don't worry." Mo Tiange said calmly, "Think about it. If you were alone and entered the formation, what would you do?" Qiu Qingrua tilted his head and pondered. Alone. I can only try using some things to break the formation. If that doesn't work, I'll try fighting on this ice field to cause spiritual aura turbulence. At that time, I'll suppress the spiritual aura here and maybe I'll pass. If that doesn't work, I'll have to endure these 3 days and withdraw regretfully. You're right. Mo Tiange said, although formations are used in the land of trials, they don't test the participants' attainments in formations. Therefore, we'll just go through the test as usual. In this world, there were not many people who were proficient in arrays, but every trial was inseparable from arrays. Therefore, the true purpose of these arrays was not to trap people, but to let the trial takers experience some kind of test. If the trial taker was strong enough, or had a clever mind, then they would pass, and there was no need to break the array. What fellow Taoist Qin said makes sense. Yong Ryu nodded in agreement. Junior Martial Sister, think about the trial methods in our group. Aren't they the same? Even if this is the Middle Ages land, it can't be separated from the scope of trials, so we don't need to worry too much. And once Yong Ryu spoke, Qiu Qingrua's complexion became a lot better. The 4 of them reached a consensus. Mo Tiange waved her hand, removing the barrier she laid a moment ago. She said, everyone, use your spiritual aura to protect yourselves. This should be one of the tests. The other 3 people also used their spiritual aura to protect themselves, blocking the wind and snow. Mia Wushang looked deeply at Mo Tiange with a hint of a smile in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. She knew Mo Tiange removed the barrier because it was a bit strenuous for her to protect the 4 of them, not because this was a test. However, she didn't think there was anything wrong with Mo Tiange doing this. In this secret ancient land, they still didn't know the situation, so it wasn't the time to abuse their sympathy. She was also in the middle stage of the core formation realm, so she didn't need Mo Tiange's protection. As for Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua, if they didn't have enough strength, they didn't need to be responsible for their lives. Once everything was ready, Mo Tiange said, let's go. This is an illusory formation for the test. As soon as we move, it should cause spiritual aura turbulence. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua nodded and followed Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang, walking forward. The 2 martial siblings were in the early stage of the core formation realm, while Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang were in the middle stage, so they should be the leaders. Moreover, Mo Tiange had a spiritual treasure and was very familiar with formations, so she naturally became their leader. As the 4 of them walked forward, the spiritual aura in their surroundings began to turbulence. This turbulence became more and more intense, gradually forming a spiritual aura vortex around the 4 of them. This vortex wasn't obvious. If it were a circle, it would cover a very large area, so the other 3 people didn't feel it. However, Mo Tiange had the 8 trigrams diagram in her sleeve, which allowed her to sense the fluctuations of spiritual aura in her surroundings to a very subtle degree. If it could be said that the 4 of them had entered a test map when they arrived at the ice field, then the formation of this spiritual vortex was the true test. Be careful, Mo Tiange reminded them when she sensed the spiritual aura vortex was becoming more and more obvious. We've already triggered the formation, so there will be a test at any time. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua nodded cautiously, and Nia Wushang also had a solemn expression. This was an ancient secret land, they hadn't forgotten this point. Ancient divine abilities were mysterious, subtle, and hard to describe. They weren't something current cultivators could hope to achieve. If they were careless, they might be defeated in an instant. They agreed to Castellan May's request to enter the secret land because they wanted to experience the ancient divine abilities and comprehend their mysteries. If they were immediately defeated upon seeing the ancient divine abilities, they would lose the meaning of this trial. The wind around them grew stronger and stronger, carrying with it snowflakes that rushed towards them. Although it didn't really hurt their bodies, their eyes and ears could sense the momentum that was rushing towards them. At this time, the spiritual aura vortex had already formed. It was like a big mouth that was about to pounce on them. Chapter 402. The moment the spiritual aura vortex rushed towards them, everyone reacted differently. Nia Wushang, who was wearing a boxing glove, threw a punch at the ice field. With a loud bang, the snowy mist on the ice field flew up and formed a barrier around her. Yong Ryu and Xiao Qingrua each took out a jade bracelet and intertwined them. The two jade bracelets combined into one and emitted a dazzling light from the point where they intersected, forming a powerful shield that protected the two of them tightly. As for Mo Tiange, she fumbled in her Qingquan bag and took out the white silk handkerchief. With a light wave, the white silk handkerchief turned into mist and surrounded her. Of course, these were just self-protection methods. The Middle Ages trial wouldn't let them pass so easily. After stabilizing themselves in the snowstorm, the four of them used their own methods to fight against the snowstorm that attacked them. In the beginning, although Mo Tiange was cautious, she didn't care too much because they had just entered the land of the trial. Logically speaking, this trial shouldn't be too difficult. However, not long after, she became more and more surprised. These snowstorms seemed to have intelligence. They could actually adjust the direction and strength of their attacks according to the changes in the spiritual aura around her. The Middle Ages' divine power was indeed unusual. After fighting for several breaths, they blocked the snowstorm several dozen feet away again. Mo Tiange shook her sleeves and summoned the 8 trigrams of Tai Chi. Then, she turned her wrist and summoned the heaven and earth fan. The cold wind became fiercer and fiercer. Ice chips and snowflakes hit the spiritual aura barrier around the four of them, carrying a powerful momentum. The four of them held their breath and focused, fighting against the invisible snowstorm giant. The snowstorm became fiercer and fiercer, as if there was a faint hand controlling them from behind. The four of them were able to handle it with ease in the beginning, but gradually, they became flustered. Yong Ryu and Xiao Qingrua were in the early stage of the core formation realm. Although they could defeat ordinary cultivators, they were only on par with a middle-stage core formation cultivator like Mo Tiange. As for Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang, although they weren't unable to handle it, their spiritual aura was slowly becoming chaotic. Calm your mind. Upon realizing this, Mo Tiange shouted, "We have to join hands." In any case, if they worked together and supported each other, the situation would be better than fighting alone. They wouldn't lose sight of each other. These past few days, Nia Wushang and Mo Tiange had developed a certain level of tacit understanding. Now, without saying a word, she immediately approached Mo Tiange. But what surprised them was that Yong Ryu and Xiao Qingrua also came over to them without the slightest hesitation. Mo Tiange felt a bit strange, but she also felt very relieved. When they traveled together, they were not afraid of being on guard against each other, but they were afraid of not being able to cooperate at the critical moment. Although the cultivation levels of these two people were slightly low, they were both smart people. If the two of them joined hands, they would have considerable strength. In this case, at least she and Nia Wushang wouldn't be a burden. The four of them met up, and the surrounding snowstorm immediately became more intense. However, everyone only needed to be in charge of one direction, so it was much easier than before. Mo Tiange unfolded the heaven and earth fan. Countless petals and branches flew out of the fan, entangling with the wind and snow in front of her. As her cultivation level increased, she gradually figured out several ways to use the heaven and earth fan. Inside the fan of heaven and earth, not only were there mountains and rivers, there were also flowers, birds, fishes, and insects. All of them could be materialized. As long as her skill was high enough, she could make them materialize and use them as fighting techniques. Seeing her method, Yong Ryu looked at her with surprise. The four of them met up. Mo Tiange had spare energy now, so when she saw his look, she couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist Yong, is there something wrong?" Yong Ryu shook her head. "It's nothing. It's just that fellow Taoist Qin's magic weapon is very powerful. Its control of spiritual aura has reached a subtle level. Even though cultivators from Yunzhong are famous for being good at controlling spiritual aura, it's not easy for them to reach this level. I'm just a bit surprised." She wasn't a cultivator from Yunzhong, which was what she said when they met in Sky Snow City. It wasn't strange for Yong Ryu to have such an idea. But Mo Tiange just smiled and didn't explain much. This magic weapon came from Mo Yaoqing's idea. Mo Yaoqing was originally a cultivator from Yunzhong, and she was also a genius, so she had her own way of thinking about controlling spiritual aura. After Mo Tiange refined this magic weapon according to her idea, she slowly fumbled along Mo Yaoqing's ideas, so she naturally made great progress in controlling spiritual aura. With the four of them working together, the invisible hand controlling the whirlpool of wind and snow gradually weakened. Just as the four of them breathed a sigh of relief, the snowflakes flying around them suddenly froze into ice cubes and smashed down. "Watch out!" Nia Wushang shouted. She then leaped into the air and punched the air with her fists. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange's heart trembled. It wasn't only because of the ice cubes, but also because of Nia Wushang's strength. Her fists that struck the air were almost illusory. With the strength of her fist technique alone, she managed to block these ice cubes. Martial cultivators. So this was a martial cultivator. What formidable strength. In the past 100 years, Mo Tiange hadn't seen many martial cultivators, and she hadn't seen any who reached the core formation realm. When she followed second uncle and wandered about, she once saw a martial cultivator. That martial cultivator was the same as second uncle. He was already more than 200 years old, but he was still in the early stage of the foundation building realm. He said martial cultivators were a bit stronger than ordinary magic cultivators in fights of magical power, but it was much harder for them to make a realm breakthrough. Those who could cultivate to the core formation realm were as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. He cultivated painstakingly for more than 200 years. With his martial strength alone, many middle-stage cultivators were no match for him, and he could even fight against late-stage cultivators. However, he couldn't see any hope of making a realm breakthrough. He believed that if a martial cultivator advanced to the core formation realm, he would be even stronger. However, he didn't have the chance. Mo Tiange didn't know what happened to that martial cultivator. He was just a person she and second uncle came into contact with during their wanderings. She understood this martial cultivator's desolate and helpless feeling, but she didn't have the chance to verify his words. It wasn't until today, when she saw Nia Wushang attacking with all her strength, that she realized what that martial cultivator said was right. A martial cultivator who cultivated to the core formation realm was a terrifying existence. If she didn't have so many spiritual treasures, if she was just an ordinary core formation cultivator, she definitely wouldn't be Nia Wushang's opponent. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange glanced at Nia Wushang with a complicated expression. After a while, she couldn't help but laugh. She didn't want to enjoy the pleasure of giving pointers to Nia Wushang when she befriended him. On the contrary, she hoped to have a like-minded person with whom she could discuss and advance together. She was confident that she wasn't an ordinary core formation cultivator, and she also had lofty ideals and firm confidence. That being the case, the stronger Nia Wushang was, wouldn't it be more motivating for her? The strength of a friend shouldn't be a pressure to hold her back, but a motivation to speed up. Why are you in a daze? If you don't help me, I'm going to die of exhaustion. Nia Wushang's grumbling voice reached her ears. Mo Tiange regained her train of thought and showed a faint smile. The momentum on her body suddenly became stronger, and she continuously waved the heaven and earth fan. Countless flowers and trees knocked away the falling ice cubes. An hour later, the ice cubes gradually disappeared, and the spiritual aura in their surroundings finally returned to normal. The four of them heaved sighs of relief. Each of them found a place to sit down and began to recover their spiritual aura. According to their current situation, they should have passed this test. An ancient divine ability was an ancient divine ability after all. In this trial, every one of them was almost exhausted before they could pass. However, Mo Tiange also felt a bit strange. She always felt that although this illusory formation was brilliant, it wasn't powerful enough. Logically speaking, an ancient divine ability shouldn't only have this kind of power. However, it wasn't entirely true to say that this wasn't an ancient divine ability. She indeed sensed an ancient divine ability's aura from it, and she also sensed its profoundness and subtlety. This was too strange. Unable to think of a reason, she shook her head, sat cross-legged, and closed her eyes, concentrating on recovering her spiritual aura. In any case, they were still in the middle of the trial. If they couldn't recover their spiritual aura in time, it would have a huge impact on the later trials. Just as this thought crossed her mind, she immediately realized something was wrong. Oh? How could this be? Qiu Qingruo's surprised voice reached her ears. Mo Tiange opened her eyes and stared at her. Qiu Qingruo's complexion was deathly pale. He stared at her, then turned to look at Yong Ruyu. Senior Marshal Brother, I seem to be unable to recover my spiritual aura. I tried for a while, but the spiritual aura in my body didn't increase even a bit. Yong Ruyu's expression changed. He turned to look at Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang. Fellow Taoists, what about you? Nia Wushang frowned and said, You're right. I've been adjusting my breathing for a while, but the spiritual aura in my body didn't increase. Upon hearing Nia Wushang's affirmation, Yong Ruyu's expression became somewhat complicated. He seemed to feel a bit relieved, but he also seemed more nervous. He said with a heavy voice, Me too. Right after he said that, he and the other two people looked at Mo Tiange. Being stared at by the three of them, Mo Tiange also nodded. In fact, when she was meditating just now, the spiritual aura in her body increased slightly, but it didn't mean she wasn't affected. Now that she had Yang's spiritual aura, she had a chaotic body, and her body formed a world of its own. Even if there was no external supplement, her spiritual aura could still circulate endlessly. Because of this, the spiritual aura in her body recovered a bit faster than others, and she also had a slight advantage in fights of magical power. But just now, she only felt some spiritual aura recovered because of the circulation in her body. She didn't absorb any spiritual aura from the outside at all. As everyone knew, when cultivators meditated to recover spiritual aura, they could either absorb spiritual aura from the outside to replenish it or circulate spiritual aura in their meridians during the great circulatory cycle, which could produce weak spiritual aura. However, the spiritual aura produced by the latter was extremely weak, so in most cases, cultivators absorbed spiritual aura from the outside. It was also for this reason that spirit veins played a vital role in cultivators' cultivation. But now, when they were meditating and adjusting their breathing, they couldn't absorb spiritual aura from the outside at all. It was as if the spiritual aura in their surroundings had been silently stolen. If they were in the secular world, a place without spirit veins, this kind of situation would be very normal. However, they could clearly feel the surging spiritual aura in their surroundings. Strange. This was too strange. There was endless spiritual aura in their surroundings, but they couldn't absorb it. It was as if this spiritual aura was isolated from them. Even though they were core formation cultivators, this kind of situation still surpassed their understanding. According to common sense, this kind of situation shouldn't have happened. What went wrong in the end? Could it be that this spiritual aura couldn't be absorbed? Silence spread among the four of them. Everyone was contemplating, but none of them could figure out the reason. After a long time, Mo Tiange took a deep breath and said, We'll talk about this later. Right now, we have to recover our spiritual aura. We can't delay any longer. With her reminder, the other three people seemed to wake up from a dream. They each took out medicinal pills and spirit stones. Since they couldn't absorb spiritual aura from the outside world, they could only rely on external objects. Chapter 403. 2 hours later, everyone stopped to adjust their breaths. With the help of spirit stones and medicinal pills, they had recovered their spiritual aura, but judging from the pile of spirit stone powder around them, it was obvious how many spirit stones they used. The amount of spiritual aura a core formation cultivator's meridians and dantian could hold was unimaginable for low-level cultivators. Several low-grade spirit stones could keep an aura refining cultivator full of spiritual aura, but for core formation cultivators like them, the spiritual aura from low-grade spirit stones was basically dispensable. Only mid-grade spirit stones or higher could have an immediate effect. But mid-grade spirit stones were rare, and they were usually used to set up formations or in emergencies. Who would use them to replenish their spiritual aura? Therefore, they could only use low-grade spirit stones to replenish their spiritual aura. But even so, none of them had full spiritual aura. Since they couldn't absorb spiritual aura from the outside world, the speed of spiritual aura recovery was too slow, and they couldn't afford to waste it for a long time. Mo Tiange was the same. But her situation wasn't bad because she had a lot of restorative panaceas, and her body could still produce spiritual aura. Although it wasn't full, it wouldn't affect her strength. The formation is broken, Qiu Qingrua said happily after adjusting his breath. The power of the snowstorm gradually dissipated, and the ice field also gradually disappeared, revealing a cave. Mo Tiange smiled. Sure enough, the purpose of formations in the trial ground was just to test them. They didn't need to break the formation. But when she looked around, she became cautious again. They were currently in a cave. It wasn't accurate to say that it was a cave. To be more precise, it was a cave. It was a cave that extended in all directions and had many forks. Just where they were at, there were 3 to 5 forks. These forks were deep and serene, leading to unknown places. Fellow Taoist Qin? Nia Wushang asked in a low voice. Is there a problem? Mo Tiange shook her head and said, no, but do you think it's real or fake? Nia Wushang looked for a while then shook her head. I know nothing about formations, so I can't see through it. Fellow Taoist Qin, Yong Ryu interrupted, I think it's real. Oh. Mo Tiange was quite interested. What do you think, fellow Taoist Yong? Yong Ryu smiled and said humbly, I'm the same as cultivator Tian Can, I know nothing about formations. Therefore, this is only my speculation. He paused and said, first, the terrain. I remember that when we entered the teleportation array, we were in the Jiaoling Mountain. This cave seems to fit the description. Secondly, the spiritual energy in the surroundings is very stable. It doesn't seem like there's an illusory formation here. Mo Tiange nodded then said, what fellow Taoist Yong said is correct. I also feel the same way. Since fellow Taoist Qin also thinks that it's not an illusory formation, then this scene is indeed real? Qiu Qingrua said. Mo Tiange shook her head. Fellow Taoist Qiu thinks too highly of me. Although I know a little about formations, I don't know much about ancient divine abilities. How could I possibly miss nothing? When Qiu Qingrua heard this, he felt that it was true. How could the cultivators of today compare to the ancient divine abilities? Even a true array master might not be able to see through an ancient illusion array. In any case, since fellow Taoist Qin can't see through it, it means it's relatively safer. Qiu Qingrua looked at the fork in the road ahead and asked, what should we do next? What else can we do? Of course we keep going, Yong Ryu said. She then turned to look at Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang. Fellow Taoist Qin, fellow Taoist Tian Can, don't you think so? Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang both nodded. Looking at the situation in front of them, they indeed had no other choice but to walk down this cave and see if they could find any clues. However, Mo Tiange also felt a bit strange. That city lord Mei said this was a trial ground and that if they passed, they'd get a lot of rewards. How did he know all this? He said he didn't pass the trial when he entered, but after they came in, they passed the trial, right? She hadn't seen any notification about the trial. Mo Tiange's intuition told her that something was wrong. She must have missed something. Fellow Taoists, let's go, shall we? Yong Ryu called out again when she saw that Mo Tiange didn't move. Mo Tiange nodded then followed behind them, slowly walking into one of the forks. The path they took was the one in the middle on the left. This path was chosen by Nie Wushang. When Qiu Qingrua asked her, she casually punched the ground, creating several cracks. The biggest one pointed to the middle, so she chose the middle path. The current situation wasn't clear, so it didn't matter which path she chose, so the other three didn't have any objections. As they walked, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Although Yong Ryu's cultivation level wasn't obvious, he was extremely meticulous. After Mo Tiange glanced at him, she felt reassured and let him lead the way while she continued to ponder. Since she felt she missed something, she had to start from the beginning. First, when she and Nie Wushang went to Starfall City to check in, Elder Liang of Starfall City came to invite them under City Lord Mei's order. Later, City Lord Mei told them about the discovery of the ancient secret place and asked them to enter the secret place to obtain the heavenly god fruit for him. Finally, he led the core formation elders under him to open the secret place and let the 15 core formation cultivators enter. After thinking about it carefully, Mo Tiange realized there wasn't any problem with the general course of events, so the problem should be with the details. Details, which step of the details had gone wrong? Fellow Daoist Mo, what are you thinking about? Nie Wushang's low voice rang in Mo Tiange's ears. Mo Tiange regained her train of thought and said, I think there's something wrong with this matter. Upon hearing what he said, Nie Wushang cast him a glance, and her eyes brightened. You also think so? Also? Mo Tiange frowned. Could it be that I felt there was something wrong after we set off, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Besides, City Lord Mei was outside, so I couldn't send you a voice transmission. Really? What do you think the problem is? Nie Wushang thought for a while then said, I'm not as meticulous as you, but you know my master cultivates devil cultivation techniques, so I know more about devil path cultivators than you do. First of all, I think there's something wrong with the way they opened the transporting formation. Since this is an ancient secret place, even if they used their own method to cover it with restrictions, they shouldn't have covered it directly. You should know that things left behind from ancient times usually have pure spiritual qi. Although demonic cultivators can absorb spiritual qi, they have to go through some special mental cultivation method. This way, they can directly cover the demonic path restriction on the pure spiritual qi, which can counteract the restriction. Is that so? Mo Tiange indeed didn't know much about devil path cultivators, but after thinking about it, she felt something was wrong. According to what you said, there should be something wrong with that transporting formation, but I saw it. It's indeed an ancient formation. At this point, both of them felt puzzled and didn't know what to say. Fellow Daoist Qin, fellow Daoist Tiancan? Qiu Qingrua suddenly turned around and asked, what's wrong with you? Both of them were preoccupied with their own thoughts, so they unconsciously fell behind them. Oh, nothing. Mo Tiange quickened her steps to catch up with them. Seeing Yong Ryu's inquiring gaze, she thought about it and finally said, fellow Taoists, you're native cultivators of Yunzhong, so you must have a good understanding of Yunzhong's situation. Is it really normal for you to invite irrelevant people to explore the ancient secret place like this? Both Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were stunned. They stopped and stared at her. Mo Tiange continued to say, shouldn't they keep such a good place for themselves? Starfall City isn't big, so if they have this secret place to support them and train their cultivators well, it'll be very beneficial for them. Hearing this, Yong Ryu frowned and muttered, what fellow Daoist Qin said makes sense. So fellow Daoist Yong also thinks something's wrong? Yong Ryu thought for a while, then shook her head. I'm not sure. Fellow Daoist Qin, I don't know what kind of place your hometown is, but in Yunzhong, there have been cases of people who discovered secret places and enjoyed them for themselves, but in the end, they were discovered by big cultivation groups, leading to tragedies. Therefore, after City Lord Mei discovered the secret place, she didn't want to monopolize it, but rather took advantage of the other forces before they could react. It's not incomprehensible. Oh. So that's what happened. Mo Tiange stopped talking. In other words, she was wrong about this reason, right? But she believed in her intuition about this matter. It definitely wasn't because she was paranoid. She was sure there must be something wrong here. Fellow Daoist Qin, Nia Wushang suddenly said, let's put it this way. Do you think this secret place matches the scale of an ancient secret place? Mo Tiange stared at Nia Wushang in surprise. Nia Wushang also stared at her and continued to speak in a hoarse voice. You're also a cultivator from a big cultivation group, so your knowledge is extraordinary. Do you think this place can be considered an ancient secret place? Mo Tiange was suddenly enlightened after hearing his explanation. She was right. Although there were traces of the Middle Ages everywhere, it was too simple to call it an ancient secret place. For example, the first trial they passed, the snowstorm on the ice field, indeed contained the profoundness of an ancient divine ability, but its power was too weak. It merely exhausted their spiritual aura and couldn't cause any substantial harm to them. Upon seeing Mo Tiange's expression, Nia Wushang showed a faint smile. Although I'm not as meticulous as you, I'm a martial cultivator, so I'm naturally sensitive to power. I dare say this isn't an ancient secret place at all. It's just a fake secret place created by applying the skin of some ancient divine ability. Once Nia Wushang said this, Yong Ruyu's and Qiu Qingrua's expressions changed greatly. Yong Ryu stared at Nia Wushang for a long time before she finally asked, Fellow Daoist Tian Can, what do you mean? What else could I mean? Nia Wushang said faintly, Fellow Daoists, you two also have extraordinary backgrounds, so presumably, your horizons aren't low either. Think about it carefully. How could an ancient trial be so easy to pass? You should know that we're core formation cultivators, so we can use magic weapons. Magic weapons from the Middle Ages had great magical powers, so how could a core formation trial be so easy? Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were speechless for a long time. After a while, Qiu Qingrua said in a low voice, Our Danxia sect also has a secret place, but senior martial brother and I are only in the early stage of the core formation realm. The sect advised us to enter only after our cultivation levels are higher, but... Her gaze stopped on Nia Wushang's face for a while, then she said, What fellow Daoist Tianken said is reasonable. This trial is indeed too easy. Even if we're stronger than ordinary cultivators, it's impossible for us to be unscathed. Moreover, it also exhausted our spiritual aura, Mo Tiange suddenly interrupted. She stared at the three people in front of her and said in a heavy voice, Fellow Taoists, I'm afraid we've already entered a trap. Chapter 404. No one spoke for a long time. Nia Wushang's expression was very calm. She was mentally prepared. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua, on the other hand, looked defeated. They lowered their heads and said nothing. After a long time, Yong Ryu said in a hoarse voice, Fellow Daoist Qin, aren't you being too presumptuous? Mo Tiange said slowly, First of all core formation cultivators who passed through descending Starfall City were invited to the City Lord's mansion. I remember that Elder Liang said that none of the people he invited rejected him. How unusual is this situation? How many core formation cultivators don't have powerful backgrounds? Why would everyone rush to this so-called ancient mystic land and wait here? This is the first point of doubt. Yong Ruyu's expression changed for a long time. Eventually, she sighed and said, Although what fellow Daoist Qin said isn't certain, it's not unreasonable. Mo Tiange said, You're right. It's not that City Lord may detain core formation cultivators who didn't agree, but it's more or less suspicious. What about the second point? Qiu Qingrua stared at her and asked. Later, we agreed to City Lord May's request, but he didn't want us to get to know each other at all. He even reminded us, intentionally or unintentionally, that other people might try to kill us in the secret land. Yes, Nia Wushang said. At that time, I felt it was a bit strange. Although we core formation cultivators didn't know each other, wouldn't it be easier to pass if someone was willing to join hands? Even if we had a falling out in the end, it would be between us and not them. It could be said that letting us core formation cultivators get to know each other and find allies was beneficial to City Lord May. But he didn't. From the beginning to the end, he didn't want us to get to know each other. If fellow Taoists didn't come to visit, fellow Taoist Qin and I would probably still be companions. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua's expressions darkened. After a moment of hesitation, Qiu Qingrua said, "In fact, before Senior Marshal Brother and I looked for allies, Elder Liang advised us to go with trustworthy people instead of temporary allies. However, after Senior Marshal Brother and I considered it, we felt it would be difficult to pass with our strength, so we didn't listen to him." Mo Tiange sighed softly. It had nothing to do with him. Wasn't he being too kind by reminding her like this? Especially when it involved the interests of Starfall City. No matter how she thought about it, she found it suspicious. The third point, however, is a lot of details. Mo Tiange continued, the mystifying trace fog, the way they covered the secret place, the loss of spiritual aura, and so on. If the first 2 points were merely points of doubt, these details are enough to prove that this secret place isn't an ancient secret place at all. There was dead silence. No one said anything else. Everyone was silently thinking about what to do next. Since he had doubts, of course he had to go out. But how? Among them, Mo Tiange was the only one who understood formations, but it wasn't enough to break them. Besides, no matter how strong they couldn't compare to nascent soul cultivators. Not good. Mia Wushang suddenly thought of something. Her expression changed greatly, and she took out the small wooden puppet from her Qinkuan bag. This thing, upon seeing this thing, the other 3 people's expressions also changed, especially Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua. Although City Lord Mei said from the beginning that she'd prepare the things everyone needed for the trip to the secret place, giving everyone one magic weapon was too cautious. In particular, the miasma wasn't too serious, so there was simply no need to do so. Mo Tiange also took out the wooden puppet and examined it carefully. She also used her divine sense to explore it, but she found that there was a layer of barrier inside that prevented her divine sense from penetrating it. This was the method of a nascent soul cultivator. She was even more certain that there was definitely something wrong with this thing. What should we do? Mia Wushang asked her. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then turned to ask Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua, fellow Taoists, it seems you two don't major in the fire element. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua obviously used the same cultivation technique. At that moment, both of them shook their heads. Mo Tiange wasn't surprised. She threw the wooden puppet in her hand to the ground, opened a spiritual beast bag, summoned Xiaohua, and said, "Xiaohua, burn it with fire." Xiaohua hadn't come out for a long time. Upon seeing her, it shook its head and wanted to come over to rub against her. In the end, Mo Tiange slapped it down. "I have business to attend to." Xiaohua squeaked discontentedly. Seeing that she wasn't moved, it could only obediently turn around and spit sun-real fire at the small wooden puppet on the ground. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were a bit surprised to see Xiaohua. Spiritual beasts weren't rare, but core formation cultivators with 5th rank or higher spiritual beasts were rare. In particular, this spiritual beast didn't look ordinary at first glance because it could actually spit sun-real fire. Under the sun-real fire, the wooden puppet persisted for a long time before it finally began to melt slowly. The 4 people watched as the ordinary outer shell slowly disappeared, revealing the thing inside. It was actually a black crystal flowing with a mysterious aura. Devil crystal. Upon seeing this object, Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua simultaneously exclaimed, their faces pale. Then they untied the wooden puppet they wore on their bodies and threw it away as if it was the plague. Devil crystal? Mo Tiange stared at the 2 of them. Do the 2 of you recognize this object? Qiu Qingrua's lips trembled, but he couldn't say anything. Although Yong Ryu's expression was unsightly, in any case, he still had some self-control. At this moment, he reluctantly answered, "There's no cultivator in Yinzhong who doesn't know about this object." Speaking of this object, we have to talk about a secret technique of Yinzhong's devil cultivators, the corpse soul technique. Once they heard this name, they knew it wasn't a good thing. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang glanced at each other, then asked, "What's this technique like?" Yong Ryu calmed down a bit and said, "This secret technique is just like its name. It's a mysterious technique that turns people into corpses while they're still alive and turns them into puppets." He stopped and took a deep breath, but he still hadn't recovered from his shock. The corpse soul technique not only takes people's lives, but it also controls their souls. It's extremely vicious. Between us cultivators, although we'll fight or even take people's lives if we don't agree, refining people into puppets like this and making them unable to reincarnate for eternity is a taboo. Therefore, although this corpse soul technique is also a strange technique, there aren't many devil cultivators who know its content, and there are even fewer who dare to use it openly. Not only us cultivators on the righteous path, but even cultivators on the devil path are also very afraid of it. When she heard that, Nia Wushang muttered, "So this city lord may tricked us here to cast the corpse soul technique on us?" "It's most likely so." Cold sweat dripped down Qiu Qingrua's forehead, but he didn't wipe it off. She said, "This devil crystal is an important object for casting the corpse soul technique. This object can absorb people's spiritual essence, slowly turning us into monsters that are neither human nor devil." At this point, both Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang's expressions changed. "Will it work if we carry it with us like this?" Yong Ryu nodded, then she shook her head and explained, "Fellow Taoists, you put this devil crystal in your Qingkuan bag just now, so it's naturally useless, but my junior martial sister and I. After this object is restricted by a high-level cultivator, it'll absorb spiritual essence nearby. My junior martial sister and I have been carrying it for a long time." Then Yong Ryu's complexion alternated between green and white. Soon, she clenched her teeth and seemed to have made up her mind. "It's not too late to realize it. We'll just lose some spiritual essence qi, in other words, was the qi of the soul. For cultivators, a person was made up of the body and the primordial spirit. They usually did not care about the soul, because the soul was something that people were born with. It was there at birth and would disappear at death. It was the same for mortals and cultivators. Moreover, the soul wasn't like the primordial spirit, which couldn't be seen or touched. It wouldn't be a problem for cultivators to cultivate or fight with. Spiritual essence was the vitality of the soul. If it lost its spiritual essence, the soul would slowly solidify, lose its vitality, and eventually die. However, according to Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua, there should be some kind of strange technique attached to this devil crystal, causing the person whose spiritual essence was absorbed to enter a state that was neither dead nor alive. Mo Tiange looked at the devil crystal on the ground, then looked at the other three puppets. These puppets were carved very meticulously, and their every movement was lifelike. However, her current state of mind was different, so when she looked at them, they looked ferocious as if they were mocking her. She thought for a moment, then asked, "Since we've already discovered it, how can we destroy it?" Yong Ryu's complexion was still pale. She said woodenly, "I don't know. We only know a little about this secret technique. It's been a long time since I've heard of anyone in Yunzhong using the corpse soul technique. Let's burn it and see." Nia Wushang, who had been observing them, said, "Every devil path technique will weaken in front of a fire spell." Mo Tiange nodded. She couldn't compare to Nia Wushang in terms of proficiency in devil path techniques. Since she said she could try, she might as well try. She continued to order Xiaohua to burn the three small puppets. Soon, the three puppets turned into three pieces of devil crystal, lying quietly on the ground. After doing all this, Mo Tiange patted Xiaohua's head and rewarded it with a medicinal pill. She then asked Nia Wushang, "What about now?" Nia Wushang didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua. "Fellow Taoists, do you want these devil crystals?" Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua immediately shook their heads. They just suffered a loss and knew very little about this thing, so they didn't dare to take risks. Nia Wushang thought for a moment, then took out a handkerchief from her robe. She picked up the 4 devil crystals with her gloved hand, wrapped them in the handkerchief, and stuffed them into her Qingkuan bag. Fellow Daoist Tiancan? Mo Tiange was puzzled. Nia Wushang said, if I can escape, I'll study it. Oh. Mo Tiange didn't say anything else. Nia Wushang had a deep relationship with the devil path, so maybe this thing would be helpful to her. Fellow Taoists. Yong Ryu looked at them with a frown. Since you know we've fallen into a trap, why aren't you worried at all? They were actually still in the mood to collect devil crystals here. Mo Tiange's gaze shifted to him and she smiled. What's the use of being worried? We still don't know what's going on with this trap. Being anxious will only mess things up. Nia Wushang nodded then muttered, our opponent is a nascent soul cultivator, there's no doubt about that. Moreover, we've also fallen into their trap and are in a passive position. Our only advantage now is that maybe they still don't know we've discovered this trap. If we can figure out their plan in time, maybe we can escape with our lives. Yong Ryu and Xiao Qingrua couldn't help but nod. Their two companions were very calm, so they gradually calmed down. Then according to fellow Taoists, what should we do now? Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang glanced at each other then shifted their gazes to the two of them. Mo Tiange said, I'll have to ask you. You're both Yunzhong cultivators and disciples of a big cultivation group, so you must know a lot. Think about it carefully, do you have any countermeasures? Chapter 405. Dawning Pill's sect was one of the 5 great sects in Yunzhong. Although it was weak now, it had been passed down for tens of thousands of years and had countless disciples. Being from such a sect, Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were both core formation cultivators, so their knowledge shouldn't be narrow. Since they knew this was the corpse soul technique, they should know some ways to deal with it. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua glanced at each other and lowered their heads in contemplation. Senior Martial Brother, Qiu Qingrua said hesitantly after a while, City Lord Mei knows our identities, so why did he trick us into coming here? Not only us, but among those devil cultivators, there are also core formation experts from the 3 devil regions. How could a mere city lord like him offend them? Yong Ryu pondered for a while then said, this is indeed suspicious, but we did find devil crystals. City Lord Mei definitely harbors malicious intentions. But, since this matter is already in front of us, it's meaningless to deny it. We can only say that there must be some conditions that we neglected. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua finished talking, then turned to Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang. Fellow Taoists, my junior martial sister is right. According to common sense, Descending Star City is only a small devil region in the northern Qilan country. Even if he's a nascent soul cultivator, he can't afford to offend the forces behind us. Therefore, City Lord Mei must have obtained great benefits by doing this, so much that he can ignore these forces or give up on Descending Star City, Mo Tiange said with a frown. Correct, Yong Ryu said, I thought about it for a while and still felt something was wrong. Even if he used the corpse soul technique on all 15 core formation cultivators, it wouldn't be of much benefit to him. After being controlled by the corpse soul technique, a cultivator's cultivation level won't drop, but his strength won't be as good as before. I'm sure you too understand this reason. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang nodded. It was obvious that there was a difference in power between a self-aware person and a puppet. Yong Ryu continued, 15 core formation puppets may sound terrifying, but they're nothing to a nascent soul cultivator. A nascent soul cultivator's strength is comparable to a core formation cultivator's. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he could fight 100 core formation puppets alone. Even an early-stage nascent soul cultivator wouldn't be afraid. Exactly. Now that Mo Tiange had confirmed it, Yong Ryu continued, then the question comes back to us. What kind of benefits can this city lord Mei obtain from this matter that made him disregard the consequences like this? This time, Yong Ryu didn't wait for anyone to answer. She already said in a deep voice, I've thought of something. Since he refined so many core formation puppets, he must have a special use that can greatly increase his strength. Upon hearing what he said, Mo Tiange began to ponder in her heart. Yong Ryu's inference wasn't wrong. If there weren't enough benefits, then City Lord Mei wouldn't have done this. With so many core formation cultivators present, it was simply impossible to conceal their whereabouts. There were many high-level cultivators in Yunzhong. Every great force had several nascent soul cultivators, and late nascent soul cultivators weren't rare either. City Lord Mei wasn't afraid of the forces behind them coming to seek revenge. This meant that this benefit was enough for her to stand among the top cultivators. She wasn't afraid of late nascent soul cultivators. At this point, there were two possibilities. First, this benefit could allow him to advance to the late nascent soul realm. This was a temptation no nascent soul cultivator would be able to resist. Second, this could allow him to obtain a supreme magic weapon or a heaven-shaking divine ability. That way, he wouldn't have to fear those late nascent soul cultivators coming to seek revenge. With this thought in mind, Mo Tiange asked, "Fellow Taoist Yong, I have two inferences. Which one do you think is more likely?" After Mo Tiange explained the two inferences, Yong Ryu wrinkled her brows and pondered. After a while, she answered, "The latter." "Why?" Mo Tiange asked. "Because, those core formation cultivators in Descending Stars City seem to know about this," Yong Ryu said. Mo Tiange was startled and began to ponder carefully. Even if City Lord Mei didn't explain this matter clearly to her subordinates, those core formation cultivators definitely wouldn't be clueless about it. After all, those core formation cultivators also played a part in deceiving them into this trap. For example, Elder Liang and the several people who opened the restriction, these things couldn't be hidden from them. That being the case, there were two possibilities. One was that those core formation cultivators were completely aware of this matter. In that case, not only would City Lord Mei benefit from this matter, but it would also bring benefits to their subordinates as well. That way, they wouldn't need to be afraid of the influence behind these deceived cultivators. The other possibility was that City Lord Mei didn't tell them everything or use some other reason to brush off her subordinates. But if that was the case, why would these people go all out to help City Lord Mei? Cultivators were naturally self-interested, and devil cultivators were even more so. It was undeniable that some people had the spirit of loyalty in the secular world, but not all of them. Or perhaps, these cultivators had long been under City Lord Mei's control and had no choice. This wasn't impossible, but based on Elder Liang's behavior, the possibility was relatively small. One side denied and the other confirmed. The conclusion was very obvious. Yong Ryu's judgment was correct. If they obtained a supreme magic weapon or a heaven-shaking divine ability, then it was very likely that this magic weapon or divine ability could protect the core formation cultivators in Descending Stars City. That was why they went all out to help City Lord Mei. But the other possibility couldn't be completely erased. After all, people were alive, and they didn't know what City Lord Mei had done. Perhaps City Lord Mei used some method to force these core formation cultivators to help him. At that time, if he obtained a profound cultivation level, even those late-stage nascent soul cultivators wouldn't be able to do anything to him. What would happen to Descending Stars City have to do with him then? Compared to advancing to the late stage of nascent soul and becoming a top-notch cultivator, what was a city lord? The entire Descending Stars City would be nothing more than a dispensable chess piece. At this point, Yong Ryu knocked her head with a distressed expression. "But I really don't understand. How could using the corpse soul technique to create so many core formation puppets bring him so many benefits?" "We missed a possibility," Nia Wushang, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said. Nia Wushang, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, "Perhaps, this magic crystal isn't used to cast the corpse soul technique." Hearing this, Yong Ryu was stunned. Not used to cast the corpse soul technique? Correct. Nia Wushang stared at him and said calmly, "Fellow Taoist Yong, could it be that this devil crystal can only be used to cast the corpse soul technique?" Yong Ryu thought for a while, then shook his head. "I don't know. Although this thing is terrifying, it's also precious. As for what it's used for, I'm also not very clear." It's just that this thing is too famous for using the corpse soul technique. Whenever I mention devil crystals, I'll immediately think of the corpse soul technique. That's right, Nia Wushang continued, I've done some research on the devil path, so I know some superficial things. Since this thing has the unique function of absorbing spiritual essence, it's definitely not only used for one evil technique. Moreover, some evil techniques can be invented according to this thing's characteristics. Correct, Chiu Qingrua murmured. Senior Marshal Brother, do you remember that rumor? The corpse soul technique was invented by a devil monarch with extraordinary divine power after discovering devil crystals. Yong Ryu wiped the sweat on his face. His complexion was deathly pale as he said dejectedly, this matter is becoming more and more difficult to imagine. I'm really powerless, fellow Taoist Yong. Mo Tiange stared at him with a fierce gaze. What are you saying? Don't tell me you want to give up now? Despair appeared on Yong Ryu's face. How can core formation cultivators like us fight against someone who can invent an evil technique? It's not my wish, I'm really powerless. Nia Wushang let out a cold humph and stared at him. We asked you to think of a way because you understand the situation in Yunzhong. We didn't ask you to bring about your own destruction. Right now, everything is just speculation, yet you want to end your own life? Raise your spirits. Otherwise, we can kill you right now to avoid you from damaging our morale. Chapter 406. Fellow Taoist Tian Can. Chiu Qingrua cried out involuntarily. She took a few steps forward, stood in front of Yong Ryu, and stared at Nia Wushang nervously. Nia Wushang was now wearing the clothes of Tian Can. She was dressed in black and looked fierce. She wasn't a kind person. She stared at Yong Ryu with a cold gaze and a stern tone. Her whole body was filled with murderous intent as if she could spill blood at any time. Mo Tiange couldn't help but smile when she saw Mo Tiange's expression. This reminded her of the first time she met Nia Wushang. That was during Marshal Uncle Xuanin's soul formation ceremony. At that time, they were still just foundation-building cultivators, but Nia Wushang, because of a disagreement, attacked someone else. It was exactly this kind of imposing manner and threatening killing intent. Nevertheless, after more than 60 years, Nia Wushang today was a bit less gloomy compared to the past and a bit more imposing. Fellow Taoist Qin, you. Seeing Nia Wushang's disdainful gaze and unyielding attitude, Chiu Qingrua turned to Mo Tiange, who she could talk to. However, when she turned her head, she saw Mo Tiange's smiling face. Her heart couldn't help but sink to the bottom. Could it be that he had chosen the wrong partner this time? This fellow Taoist Qin seems to have a good temper, but she's actually cold-blooded and doesn't care about other people's lives. Chiu Qingrua was very nervous. Mo Tiange smiled back at Chiu Qingrua as if she didn't feel anything. She then turned to Nia Wushang and said, I knew I'd never be able to learn your ruthlessness. Nia Wushang snorted, raised her eyes, and said nothing. She wasn't like Mo Tiange, who tried her best to control herself from killing people. Since she was a child, she killed countless people under Master Song Fang's instruction, so she didn't care about killing people at all. To her, Yong Ryu and Chiu Qingrua were just two strangers. It wasn't a big deal to kill them. But now isn't the time to kill them. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment then looked at Yong Ryu with a smile. Fellow Taoist Yong, although I don't like killing people, I'm on fellow Taoist Tiansan's side. If you have this kind of idea, even if we don't kill you, you'll lose your life the moment you give up, in addition to your junior martial sister's life. At this point, Yong Ryu's gaze moved, and she looked at Chiu Qingrua with a pale face. He saw the situation just now. Nia Wushang was incomparably fierce, but Chiu Qingrua stood in front of him without any hesitation. They had been martial brothers and sisters for several hundred years, and they had also become Taoist companions. They had been together for many years, and he knew Chiu Qingrua's personality very well. Although her cultivation was not low, and her strength was not weak, she had been too dependent on him all these years. If she collapsed, she would definitely not be able to survive. Senior brother. Qiu Qingrua looked at him with pleading eyes. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't say anything in the end. Yong Ryu sighed, junior sister, I've disappointed you, There was confusion in Qiu Qingrua's eyes. He didn't understand what he meant. Was he regretting his actions just now, or was he apologizing for his incompetence? In the next moment, her gaze became firm. She held Yong Ryu's hand and said, no matter what you do, I'll only stand by your side. You can rest assured. Yong Ryu was shocked. Many things flashed in her eyes as she stared at Emotienga. In the end, she sighed and said, junior sister, you're still so affectionate towards me even at this time. That year, I let you down, what's the point of saying this? Qiu Qingrua's gaze became gentle. All these years, you let me control you, and I stopped all the women who approached you, but you didn't complain at all. Do you think I still don't understand your feelings? It's just that I've always been unwilling. Enough, you too. Nia Wushang coldly interrupted their affectionate words. What kind of situation is it now? You still have time to talk about this? Quickly decide. If you want to live, cheer up and think of a way. If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish right now. Yong Ryu's complexion turned pale at first. He then looked at Qiu Qingrua, then at Emotienga and Nia Wushang. Gradually, a determined expression appeared on his face. In the end, he clenched his teeth, cupped his hands and said, fellow Taoists, I was impolite just now. Thank you for reminding me. Upon seeing his reaction, Nia Wushang's expression gradually softened. She withdrew her gaze and said faintly, since you want to live, it'll be easy. Oh. Judging from her tone, it seemed she already had an idea, so Emotienga asked, what did you think of? Nia Wushang glanced at her and said, I think there are two ways to deal with this. The first is to find other people and see what happened to them. Maybe they'll have other clues. The second is to wait and see. Since Castellan Mace schemed against us, but we didn't follow his plan and took that puppet with us, he must have a backup plan. Emotienga nodded while thinking. What you said makes sense. She then turned to the other two people and asked, fellow Taoist Yong, fellow Taoist Qiu, what do you think? Yong Ryu's face, which had just regained some color, smiled bitterly and said, fellow Taoists, I'll leave this matter to you. If there's anything you need to know, you can ask me again. He had just experienced a state of sorrow and joy, so it really wasn't the time to think calmly. Emotienga and Nia Wushang also understood the situation, so they didn't ask any more questions. After thinking for a while, Emotienga looked at Nia Wushang and said, the two methods you mentioned don't conflict with each other. How about we look for other people while waiting for the follow-up plan? Nia Wushang nodded in agreement. After a simple agreement, the four of them rested and reorganized themselves before resuming their journey. These caves extended in all directions and had many forks. In the end, the four of them simply let it be and walked casually. Nia Wushang was right about one thing. No matter what kind of plan Castellan May had, it would be revealed in the end. If they really couldn't figure it out, they could just wait. However, if they did that, they would be in a very passive position. Nevertheless, although they walked casually, Emotienga and Nia Wushang didn't let down their vigilance. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua's cultivation levels were a bit low, but the most important thing was that their will to live wasn't strong enough. Therefore, it was better for them to rely on themselves. They once again walked casually into another fork. The leader, Nia Wushang, suddenly stopped and raised her index finger to make a shushing gesture. The three people behind her stopped at the same time. Emotienga looked around but didn't see anything unusual, so she asked with her eyes. Nia Wushang secretly said, there's devil aura. Emotienga was stunned. How did you know? Her divine sense was stronger than Nie Wushang's, but she still didn't discover it. Nie Wushang blinked mysteriously and said, "The magic weapon I stole from Tianyan's sect can sense devil aura." "I see. Devil aura." Most of the people who entered the so-called secret ancient land with them this time were devil cultivators, so it was possible that other devil cultivators passed through here? Mo Tiange thought for a moment then asked, "How many people? Where did they go?" "I'm not sure, but they should be coming this way," Nie Wushang said. "We'll just wait here." Their conversation was secretly transmitted, so Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua couldn't hear it. After waiting for a long time, Qiu Qingrua couldn't help but ask, "What's going on?" Nie Wushang glanced at her then said faintly, "We're waiting for someone." "Huh?" At that moment, Mo Tiange's divine sense also sensed traces of other people. She frowned slightly and said, "3 people. 1 is in the middle stage of the core formation realm, and 2 are in the early stage." Nie Wushang sighed softly and said, "Our luck's bad. It seems it's those 3 people." Among the cultivators who entered the secret area, there was only one team of 3 people, the strong devil cultivator City Lord Mei called Jin Shi and his 2 little brothers. These 3 people looked repulsive, talked frivolously, and were hostile to them. Now, they were looking for other cultivators because they wanted to see what was going on and find out City Lord Mei's purpose. These 3 people really weren't good choices. "Oh!" Mo Tiange exclaimed in surprise. "What's wrong?" Nie Wushang asked. "The 3 of them are a bit abnormal." "Abnormal?" Mo Tiange furrowed her brows and said, "They seem to be being chased by something, and they look very distressed." "What?" Nie Wushang was surprised. At that moment, those 3 people also entered the range of her divine sense. Sure enough, it was like that. At the same time, their whereabouts were also discovered. Those 3 people suddenly sped up and ran towards them. Mo Tiange and Nie Wushang were focused on tracking those 3 people with their divine senses, so they didn't say anything for a while. Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua's divine senses were slightly weaker, so they didn't know what was going on. As they listened to their conversation and looked at their expressions, they couldn't help but feel nervous. After a while, the 2 people's spiritual senses finally sensed the approaching group of 3, causing Yong Ruyu's brows to wrinkle. After sensing for a while, he asked, "Fellow Taoists, should we wait here?" Nie Wushang answered carelessly. "But, who knows if those 3 people harbor evil intentions?" Yong Ryu said worriedly, "After all, before they entered the secret area, they were hostile to us." "So what?" Nie Wushang didn't even bat an eyelid. "If they harbor evil intentions, we'll just kill them." Upon hearing this answer, Yong Ryu shut up. After being threatened by Nie Wushang just now, he already knew this seemingly thin and weak fellow Taoist was much more ruthless than him. He showed his cowardice, and his cultivation level was also lower than hers, so he really didn't have the face to say anything at this time. As they talked, those 3 people got closer and closer. Finally, they heard footsteps coming from inside the cave. Mo Tiange immediately frowned. Based on the messy footsteps, their situation should be very bad. Did they encounter something terrible? She only had time to think about this when the 3 devil cultivators appeared at the end of a fork in the road. As soon as he saw the 4 of them, the strong man in the lead was overjoyed. He led his 2 younger brothers and rushed towards them. "Fellow Taoists, please help us." None of the 4 people made a sound. They clearly remembered the attitude these 3 people had before they entered the secret area. Now that they saw them, they actually came to ask for help so enthusiastically. No matter how they looked at it, it was very unusual. The 3 people stopped in front of them. The strong cultivator in the lead seemed to notice their vigilance, so he said anxiously, "Fellow Taoists, there's a monster in this cave. If you don't help us, that monster will attack you in the end." Chapter 407. The three devil cultivators looked back nervously from time to time. Seeing that the four of them didn't respond, the strong devil cultivator said anxiously, "Fellow Taoists, it'll be too late if you hesitate." He was about to approach the four of them. Nia Wushang raised her hand and blocked their way. The strong devil cultivator said anxiously, "What do you mean?" Nia Wushang glanced at them and said indifferently, "Why should we believe you?" "You." Her attitude wasn't polite at all. The strong devil cultivator widened his eyes and looked angry. "Big brother." The two devil cultivators behind him reminded him in a low voice, "Now's not the time to fight." The strong devil cultivator's face turned red, but in the end, he swallowed his anger and said, "Fellow Taoist, the three of us found a monster here. This monster is very powerful and cruel. The three of us were no match for it when we encountered it. Although there are four of you, you're definitely no match for it. It's better for us to join forces." "Monster?" Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows and said, "What monster? Why didn't I feel it?" Her divine sense wasn't weak, so there was no reason she couldn't feel anything. "Fellow Taoists, please believe us." An early-stage core formation cultivator behind the strong devil cultivator said eagerly, "Just an hour ago, we passed the first test. Not long after we arrived here, we encountered a monster. We couldn't feel its momentum, so we took it lightly in the beginning. But when we met face to face, we couldn't resist it at all." Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang glanced at each other and saw astonishment in each other's eyes. "Fellow Taoists, what does the monster you're talking about look like?" Hearing Mo Tiange's gentle voice, their attitudes softened a bit. The three devil cultivators were overjoyed. The strong devil cultivator said, "This monster doesn't have a body. At first glance, it looks like a strange aura. When we passed the first test, our devil aura was exhausted and hadn't fully recovered. When we encountered this monster, we wanted to repel it, but no matter what secret technique or magic weapon we used, we couldn't disperse it. Our devil aura was even absorbed." Mo Tiange's and the others' expressions changed slightly. A thought flashed in Mo Tiange's mind as she paid attention to the message. "So to say, after you entered the secret place, you couldn't recover the devil aura inside your bodies on your own?" The burly devil cultivator hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes. This matter couldn't be hidden from others. The three of them could tell at a glance." Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang glanced at each other. Both of them showed expressions of, "as expected." "Other than that, did you notice anything unusual?" The burly man was stunned and confused. "What does fellow Taoist mean?" "What I mean is, don't you think there's something strange about this secret place?" "Strange?" The brawny man was dumbfounded. He didn't say it was strange, but a monster. What was going on? "Big brother." An early core formation realm cultivator behind him whispered, "Now that you mention it, I do feel a little strange." "Oh." Mo Tiange shifted her gaze towards the cultivator who looked a bit scared. "Fellow Taoist, what did you notice?" That person glanced at the burly man in the lead. Seeing that he had no intention of stopping them, he said, "I feel that the divine ability of this secret place isn't mysterious enough." Mo Tiange's eyes brightened. She didn't expect this timid cultivator to have such insight. The burly man frowned and glared at him unhappily. "What's so strange about that? Maybe the divine ability of this secret place isn't that powerful." "That's right. Besides, Big Brother even used his trump card to protect us," another early core formation devil cultivator chimed in. "But..." The devil cultivator objected in a low voice, but even he himself wasn't confident. He only managed to say 2 words before he saw the burly man's expression and swallowed the rest of his words. Mo Tiange frowned and said, "This matter is very important. Please tell us the truth." As she spoke, she cast a glance at the burly man in the lead. Upon hearing her firm tone, the burly man hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he asked, "Did you notice something wrong?" Before Mo Tiange could say anything, Nia Wushang already took a step forward. She stretched out her claw, wanting to lift the man's sleeve. The burly man was startled. He abruptly retreated, took out his magic weapon and shouted, "What do you want to do?" Nia Wushang didn't say anything. Her figure moved and she was already close to the burly man. At such a close distance, who could move faster than a martial cultivator? The burly man only felt the hem of his robe move, and something was already hooked off. The puppet fell to the ground with a bang. Nia Wushang glanced at Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange understood, so she released Xiaohua again and patted its head. "Xiaohua, use fire to burn it." "You." Seeing that they didn't seem hostile, the burly man was puzzled. "What's wrong with this thing?" Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang didn't answer. They would soon know the answer. After burning the puppet's surface, sure enough, there was a magic crystal inside. The three devil cultivators' expressions suddenly changed when they saw this thing. "It seems you know what this thing is." Nia Wushang coldly stared at the three devil cultivators' expressions. "Now you know how serious the matter is, right? After you entered the secret place, tell me everything in detail about what happened." When they finally reacted, the other two devil cultivators hurriedly threw away the puppets they wore on their bodies and looked at the burly man in the lead. "Big brother, the burly man's complexion alternated between green and white. He looked at the magic crystal on the ground and then at Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang's expressions. He clenched his teeth and said, "Mei Feng. Turns out she was just fooling us." "Humph. Although we three brothers are only core formation cultivators, our Black Mountain City isn't that easy to bully." It seemed the three of them also had a backer, which confirmed Yong Ruyu's words. Although their cultivation levels weren't high, core formation cultivators like them couldn't afford to offend people in Descending Star City. The burly man turned towards Mo Tiange and the others. His attitude immediately became a lot friendlier, unlike before when he was forced by the situation and had no other choice. "Fellow Taoists, we offended you earlier. If it weren't for your reminder, I'm afraid we brothers would have fallen into someone's trap today." The burly man raised his hand to greet them. "My name is Jin Shi, and these are my two brothers, Mu Shi and Yu Gui. We're cultivators from Black Mountain City." Mo Tiange had heard that Black Mountain City was one of the northern Qilan country's 7 small devil domains. At this moment, the four of them returned the greeting and reported their names. After the formal greeting, Jin Shi impatiently asked, "Fellow Taoists, how did you find this magic crystal?" "That's unexpected." Mo Tiange changed the topic and asked, "This. Fellow Taoist Mu Shi, what did you think was strange before? This is an important matter, so please explain it to us one by one." Of course. Now that he had obtained Jin Shi's permission, this devil path cultivator called Mu Shi no longer had any scruples. He spoke frankly with assurance. "First of all, among the three of us, apart from Big Brother who has a high cultivation level, Yu Gui and I only have ordinary strength. We originally thought we wouldn't be able to pass the first test, but in the end, it was more daunting than dangerous. After we passed the test, I thought about it carefully and realized that although the first test seemed mysterious, its power was still lacking. Originally, Yu Gui and I couldn't go on, but the spell in the test suddenly weakened, as if it deliberately let us pass." Mo Tiange nodded. This Mu Shi was very meticulous. If it was someone careless, they might have skipped the test. Many people would casually find a reason when they encountered something unreasonable, telling themselves it should be reasonable. Secondly, after we passed the first test and entered this place, we've encountered several groups of people. In total, more than half of them passed the test. This is really unusual. Upon hearing this, Nia Wushang immediately interrupted him. "Did you encounter other people?" "Yes." The one who answered was Jin Shi. "When we arrived here, we encountered 3 people in total. If we count the 7 of us, there are 10 people in total, and this doesn't include those we didn't encounter." Nia Wushang looked at Mo Tiange. The two of them didn't know what to say. What did City Lord Mei warn them before this? She said the test in this ancient secret place was extremely difficult and that no one in Descending Stars City could pass it. Although they only passed the first test, the difference in difficulty was too big. Of course, there was still one difficulty: both spiritual aura and devil aura couldn't recover on their own. If this continued, it was very likely that none of them could pass the test. However, City Lord Mei didn't warn them about this at all. After a long silence, Yongryu, who hadn't said anything, finally spoke. Then, what's the matter with the monster you mentioned before? Did you run away when you realized you couldn't defeat it? Did it chase after you? Aside from magic weapons being unable to deal with it, what characteristics did it have? The one who answered was still Mu Shi. He was obviously the most attentive among the three people. Not long after we arrived here, we found that monster. At first, we thought it was the devil cultivator's test City Lord Mei talked about. However, after we approached it, we realized in just a few breaths' time that we couldn't judge the monster's strength by its aura. Since we couldn't defeat it, we ran away. The monster chased after us, but its speed wasn't fast. When we realized this, we felt relieved. However, it didn't take long for us to realize that although it was slow, its movements were mysterious and it actually chased after us. After that, no matter how long we ran, it would appear again. It was like a ghost that we couldn't shake off. An astonished expression appeared on Yongryu's face. There's actually such a strange thing in this world? Yes, Jinshur said. That's why we can only call it a monster. We brothers are experienced and knowledgeable, but this is the first time we've seen this kind of thing. Right, when we ran away, we met a fellow devil cultivator. He didn't believe us, but in just a few breaths' time, he was swallowed by this monster. Not even a bit of him was left. He turned into a mass of devil aura and completely disappeared. Yongryu's expression changed. This, Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang also looked shocked. A core formation cultivator was swallowed in just a few breaths' time, and not even his bones were left. What kind of thing was this monster? Things are getting more and more complicated. After a long time, Mo Tiange scratched her head. While pondering, she said slowly, a nascent soul cultivator who tricked us into a trap full of lies. Every one of us had devil crystals that could absorb spiritual aura that couldn't be recovered. Now, there was also this kind of monster. What did City Lord Mei want to do? Chapter 408. No matter what City Lord Mei wanted to do, they were now turtles in a jar. If they wanted to escape, they had to crawl out of the jar or break it. However, whether they wanted to crawl out or break the jar, it wasn't easy because the cultivation level of the person who set up the jar was much higher than theirs. Moreover, they were already trapped in the jar and were in an extremely passive position. Mo Tiange even thought that City Lord Mei might be watching them from the outside right now as if he was watching a fish in a fish tank. No matter how they swam, they couldn't escape from his palm. This kind of feeling was really unpleasant, but it was a fact that the other party's strength was higher than theirs, so they had no choice but to endure it. Fellow Daoist Qin, Yongryu whispered, "What should we do now?" That monster isn't a problem, Nia Wushang answered. According to what these fellow Taoists said, no matter how we run, we'll be found eventually. That being the case, it's useless for us to run. Besides, its speed is slow, so even if we can't defeat it, we can still run. That being the case, we might as well wait here and see what that thing is. If we can't defeat it, it won't be too late to think of a way out. Mo Tiange expressed her approval. According to the description of these three devil cultivators, that monster really couldn't escape, so they could only do this. Fellow Taoists, what do you think? Jinshur said, "Your decision is in line with mine." The three brothers' breaths were unstable and the devil aura inside their bodies was insufficient. They needed to rest for a while, even if it meant taking a few medicinal pills to replenish their devil aura. Since no one had any objections, the seven of them found a safe place to rest for the time being. Fellow Daoist Mo Tiange, who was sitting back to back with Nia Wushang in the passage, heard Nia Wushang's voice transmission. Mo Tiange, who was still meditating and adjusting her breath, answered softly. Is it possible that City Lord Mei's purpose is related to that monster? Nia Wushang's words made Mo Tiange pause. She thought for a moment then asked, why do you say that? City Lord Mei must know about that monster's existence. That being the case, why did he lure us here? Why did he want us to kill that thing? That's obviously impossible. According to what the three of them said, I'm afraid we're no match for this thing. Upon hearing what Nia Wushang said, a thought flashed through Mo Tiange's mind. You're saying, he deceived us into coming here to feed that monster? Yes, that's possible. Nia Wushang said, if this monster is his pet, then he has to find some food for it every once in a while. Mo Tiange suddenly felt her blood run cold. In that case, they weren't even fish but earthworms thrown into the fish tank for the fish to prey on. After thinking for a while, she composed herself and said, it's not impossible. If this was the truth, then how could the magic crystal and the environment where spiritual energy could not be restored be explained? Also, if he only wanted to feed them, he could have just kidnapped the nomadic cultivators who were passing by the city. Why did he have to make a move on the completion-leveled cultivators? Wouldn't we be offending those major powers for no reason? Nia Wushang was silent as if she was thinking. After a while, she answered, that monster's speed is very slow, so we'll be devoured in the end if we can't restore our spiritual energy. As for why he even targeted those core formation cultivators with extraordinary backgrounds, I think it's because he could only do it once. Moreover, just like we guessed, the benefits were so great that he didn't care about it at all. As for the magic crystal, I can't explain it. After all, this was just their speculation. Without enough information, it was impossible for them to miss out on anything. After a while, Nia Wushang still didn't get an answer from Mo Tiange, so she couldn't help but ask, what about you? What are you thinking? I'm thinking whether that monster can be eliminated or not. Nia Wushang's spirit was lifted. Can you think of a way? Devouring and absorbing devil aura. Logically speaking, spiritual aura is the same, right? So if we encounter it, our spiritual aura will also be devoured. What if it's dead aura? Nia Wushang was stunned. Mo Tiange sighed. It'd be easy if Ling Yunhe was here. Ling Yunhe's spiritual beast, the vulture, was full of dead aura. No matter how powerful this monster was, it couldn't absorb dead aura, right? Nia Wushang was disappointed. I thought you had a way to get dead aura. Mo Tiange smiled bitterly. Where can I get dead aura? It was just a thought. Unfortunately, when she was in Carefree Valley, she didn't go to the Black Tortoise Temple. Otherwise, she might have found a stone tablet similar to the one in the Divine Dragon Temple and found the secret of dead aura. Of course, thinking about this now was useless. Even if she went to the Black Tortoise Temple at that time, she might not be able to find the secret. Mo Tiange felt a bit of a headache when she thought about this. Did she have to use that trick again this time? It wasn't a good thing to rely too much on the virtual sky world. Fellow Taoist Nia. Nia Wushang seemed to be still thinking about that problem, so she answered casually. If I can't avoid it, I have a secret technique that can help me escape. What about you? I also have a few methods. But in the current situation, I might not be able to do it. Nia Wushang wasn't very confident when it came to this matter. Although she thought her strength wasn't bad, she was now facing a nascent soul cultivator. The gap between the nascent soul and the core formation realm really wasn't that easy to cross. Mo Tiange understood. She hesitated for a moment then asked, this secret technique of mine can also help you. However, I'll knock you out first. Can you accept it? She absolutely wouldn't let a third person know about the secret of the virtual sky world, even if she had a good friendship with Nia Wushang. If she wanted to save Nia Wushang's life, she had to make sure Nia Wushang was unconscious. However, she didn't know whether Nia Wushang was willing to put her life in her hands. Nia Wushang only thought for a moment, then said, "If I really can't escape, it's up to you." After a pause, she shook her head and sighed. "In any case, it's not the first time I've put my life in your hands." Mo Tiange didn't quite understand what she meant. Just as she was about to ask, her divine sense, which had always been on guard, suddenly sensed a strange aura. A chill ran down her back. She opened her eyes and said, "There's something. It seems to be the monster the three fellow Taoists talked about." When the others heard what she said, they all stood up and took action with their magic weapons. Jin Shi looked at her in surprise. He probably didn't expect her divine sense to be a bit stronger than his. After all, on the surface, Mo Tiange's cultivation level was just in the middle stage of the core formation realm, even weaker than his. Soon, the others also sensed the monster's approach. Its speed was indeed not fast, but if they weren't careful, it would be out of the range of their divine senses. This thing was indeed strange. Before long, the monster finally appeared at the end of the passage. Just as Jin Shi and his two companions said, this monster didn't seem to have a strong momentum. It was just a strange black aura that seemed easy to scatter. However, they already learned about the danger of this thing from Jin Shi and his two companions, so none of them dared to take it lightly. Among the 7 people, Yong Ruyu was the first to act. He and Xiao Qingrua used their jade bracelets. A ray of light shone and shot towards the monster. Just now, the two of them didn't have strong wills. They knew their status in this team wasn't as high as before, so they simply took the initiative to test the monster. Their actions were exactly what the others were thinking. Jin Shi and his two companions had already fought with this monster. Now that they saw it, they knew it was already weak, so they could only hope the 4 of them had other methods. As for Mo Tiange, she also hoped someone could test it and think of a way to deal with it. Yong Ruyu and Xiao Qingrua's jade bracelets were a set of rarely seen combined magic weapons. Compared to single magic weapons, this kind of magic weapon had more variations. Right now, the 2 of them used it to strangle the monster rather than to kill it. The light from the jade bracelets formed a circle, trapping the monster. It suddenly tightened as if it wanted to strangle the monster's aura. Under the twisting of the light, the aura was easily divided into 2 halves. Yong Ruyu and Xiao Qingrua looked happy, but Mu Shi already shouted, "If you break this thing up, it'll immediately gather back together." The light from the jade bracelets dissipated. Sure enough, after the light disappeared, the aura that was strained slowly gathered back together as if it had never been hit. Yong Ruyu and Xiao Qingrua's expressions changed. This was their most powerful magic weapon. Didn't that mean they couldn't deal with this monster? "Senior Marshal Brother, what should we do?" Xiao Qingrua asked. How could Yong Ruyu know what to do? Right now, his mind was also in a mess. He cast his gaze towards Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang. Nia Wushang had been silent since the monster appeared. Mo Tiange didn't know what she was thinking, so she hurriedly took out the heaven and earth fan. She unfolded the heaven and earth fan. With a crane cry, the red-crowned crane soared into the sky and directly attacked the monster with lightning speed. It pierced through the monster's body and created a hole. But in the next moment, the red-crowned crane disappeared in the air. The monster's aura still slowly condensed and became one. Mo Tiange's expression darkened. Spiritual aura. This was also a test move. This red-crowned crane was only a small spiritual aura transformed from the heaven and earth fan, but just now, not only did it not cause any substantial damage to the monster, but the spiritual aura condensed into the crane also disappeared. Jin Shi and the others were right. This monster could absorb both devil aura and spiritual aura. This was bad. The current situation was similar to the feeling they had when they faced the giant ape in Carefree Valley, but it was more terrifying than the ape. Although the giant ape was invulnerable, it was still limited by its cultivation level. If it was a nascent soul cultivator, they could kill it in one fell swoop. If they fought it head-on, it wasn't impossible. However, they couldn't figure out how strong this monster was. Running away wasn't the solution. If they couldn't recover their spiritual aura here, their spiritual aura or devil aura would be consumed. In the end, they wouldn't be able to resist this monster. With their current cultivation levels, if they wanted to get out of this predicament, they could only take drastic measures and leave this place. No one attacked again. That monster slowly moved closer to them. Jin Shi and the others turned pale. They said, "Fellow Taoists, do you have any other solutions?" No one spoke. The monster's aura slowly dispersed, spreading towards everyone. "Let's go," Nia Wushang shouted. "We're not its match now. We have to preserve our strength first." No one hesitated, including Mo Tiange. In the blink of an eye, they left their original spots and fled into the distance. Chapter 409. We're food. An hour later, everyone stopped at a passageway that didn't look any different from the previous one. Nia Wushang opened her mouth and said this. In an instant, everyone's eyes were focused on her. Nia Wushang continued, "If you want to live, you have to kill the thing that ate us or leave this place." Jin Shi and the other two people's breaths were obviously unstable. Yu Gui, who was the most timid among them, looked at Jin Shi in panic. "Big brother, this." They'd been running for a while, so they had much less devil aura than Mo Tiange's group. In the end, they'd be the first to give up. Jin Shi stared at Nia Wushang and asked, "This fellow Taoist Tian Can, are you saying that Mei Feng tricked us into coming here just to feed this monster?" Nia Wushang shook her head softly. "The truth is right in front of us, but we don't know whether it's the ultimate goal or not. If we're eaten, what ultimate goal is there?" Yong Ryu frowned with an unsightly expression. "Will this monster become stronger after eating us?" Nia Wushang snorted and looked at him. "Didn't you notice that after you attacked, the monster's aura became stronger?" Yong Ryu was stunned. He really didn't notice that. He only felt annoyed when his attack failed, but after thinking about it carefully, even if the monster's aura became stronger, it shouldn't be much stronger, right? Otherwise, with core formation cultivators' sensitivity to auras, they would have noticed it even if they didn't pay attention. Jin Yu and the other two people looked pensive. Mu Shi said hesitantly, "Indeed. When we first encountered this monster, it wasn't as strong as it is now." Yu Gui's expression changed greatly. He looked at Jin Shi and said, "Then, even if all of us joined forces, we still couldn't defeat it? What are you panicking for?" Jin Shi shouted at him. He then turned to Nia Wushang and asked politely, "Fellow Taoist, since you've noticed this, do you have a way to deal with it?" Nia Wushang shook her head. "I have a clue, but I can't think of a way yet." Jin Shi was dumbfounded. "Then what should we do next? Do we have to keep running like this? In that case, we won't be able to recover our devil aura and will be eaten in the end. I have a suggestion." Mo Tiange, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly spoke, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Although they hadn't known each other for long, they had a general understanding of each other's personalities. Yong Ryu and Xiao Qingrua were capable of fighting, and their experience was also not bad. However, at the crucial moment, they were easily confused. As for Jin Shi and the other two, there was no need to mention Yu Gui. Although Mu Shi was meticulous, his horizons were limited, and Jin Shi's conduct was somewhat crude. Because of that, only Nia Wushang and Mo Tiange could put forward feasible suggestions at the critical moment. Mo Tiange continued to say, "If the first test was to confuse us and this test was City Lord Mei's real purpose, then everyone should have reached this place." Not bad. Although Jin Shi was crude, he was not stupid. Hearing these words, he immediately thought of what she wanted to say, "If we gather everyone, maybe we can." Mo Tiange nodded in agreement. "And, if we work together, we might not necessarily have no hope." Mu Shi immediately began to calculate carefully. We have 7 people here, so there should be 8 people who are not in the same place. One of them has already been swallowed. This is something we saw with our own eyes. If the others are all fine, then there should be 7 people left. Yong-ryu looked a bit hesitant. Do we really have to gather everyone? But this place is like a maze. How are we going to find them? There were so many forks in the road that it would take a long time to walk through them. About that, Nia Wushang said, we'll divide into groups and make marks along the way. Every time we separate for half an hour, we must meet again to ensure that we won't get separated. That's fine, Jinshi said. But even if we do that, we might not be able to gather everyone. Besides, if we can't restore our devil aura. Therefore, we must determine a time, Mo Tinga said. First, let's talk about how long the medicinal pills you have can keep full of spiritual aura. This. Jinshi was the first to hesitate. For cultivators, the number of medicinal pills they had was the same as the number of magic weapons. They were all top secrets. If this kind of thing was known by others, they would fall into a passive position during fights of magical powers. Even if they were good friends, they wouldn't ask this kind of question. On the contrary, Yong-ryu immediately said, yes, we're all in the same boat now. In front of a strong enemy, we'd naturally have a higher chance of survival if we join hands, so we must trust each other for once. However, I hope we can all take an oath that we won't turn against each other before we can safely escape. No problem. Mo Tinga glanced at Jinshi and asked, fellow Taoists, what do you think? This. Jinshi was still hesitant. Seeing this, Yong-ryu said with a heavy voice, fellow Taoists, you're devil cultivators. Relatively speaking, the binding force of an oath on you isn't as strong as ours. If you can't even accept this, how can we trust each other? Without trust, how can we cooperate? Big brother, he's right, Mu Shi reminded him in a low voice. The situation is urgent, so we can only do this. After hesitating for a long time, Jinshi clenched his teeth and said, all right, we have to gamble. He then raised his hand and said, I, Jinshi, hereby take an oath to the devil god that I'll advance and retreat together with all the fellow Taoists here and trust each other. I'll treat you the same way you treat me. If I harbor evil thoughts and violate my oath, I'll never be able to advance to the nascent soul realm for the rest of my life, and all my divine abilities will be crippled. After he finished chanting, Mu Shi and Yugui did the same. After making the oath, the 3 of them stared at Mo Tinga and the others. Mo Tinga didn't hesitate. She said first, I swear by my inner demon that before I can safely escape, as long as fellow Taoists don't violate the oath, I'll trust you wholeheartedly and will never turn against you. If I violate this oath, Tao Ancestor will bear witness and let me be trapped by my inner demon for the rest of my life. My cultivation level won't be able to advance even an inch, and my divine abilities will be crippled. Then Nia Wushang, Yong-ryu, and Qiuqingrua made the oath one by one. When the last person finished speaking, the 7 of them heaved sighs of relief. They finally had a preliminary trust among each other. Mortals might be able to deny oaths, but cultivators like them couldn't. The reason they embarked on the path of cultivation was because they believed there were immortals and devils in this world. That being the case, how could they violate their oaths? Even though devil cultivators didn't cultivate their minds as strictly as Tao cultivators, they still had their own taboos. After making the oath, Jinshi was straightforward. He took out several bottles of medicinal pills from his robe and said, for us devil cultivators, there aren't many medicinal pills we can take directly. After entering this secret place, we've consumed a lot of devil cores. These bottles are the only medicinal pills I have left. I think they can probably last us for a day or 2. Mu Shi said, I have less than Big Brother, but if I use them sparingly, it won't be a problem for me to last a day. Yugui opened his Chinkuan bag and looked inside. I'm about the same as Mu Shi. I can probably only last us for a day. Seeing this situation, Mo Tinga wrinkled her brows. She knew devil cultivators usually didn't have many medicinal pills, but she didn't expect they would have so few. They had been walking for a long time, but they still hadn't found the end of this cave. If they wanted to search the whole cave, it definitely wouldn't be a matter of a day. In addition, in order to deal with that monster, they had to save some medicinal pills for the last moment and couldn't use them all. Next was Chingruo. Our situation is a bit better. I often concoct medicinal pills, so I have a lot of medicinal pills that can be used as restorative panaceas. I think it won't be a problem for me and senior marshal brother to take them for 3 to 5 days. Upon hearing this, Mo Tianga's expression became a bit better. Core formation cultivators, especially core formation cultivators who belonged to a sect, could only get by if they had so many medicinal pills. Nia Wushang spread her hands and said, I don't have many medicinal pills, but I have a treasure that can replenish my spiritual aura and can last us for 3 to 5 days. Finally, Mo Tianga said, I have a lot of medicinal pills on me, so 3 to 5 days won't be a problem. She didn't finish her sentence and continued, that being the case, let's make an agreement on the other matters. The others didn't have any objections. They agreed on a marking in a rough route, and in the end, they split into 3 groups. The 3 devil cultivators naturally stayed together. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingruo went one way, while Mo Tianga and Nia Wushang went the other. Although everyone had sworn an oath, when it came to splitting up, they still needed to trust each other and have a tacit understanding. Fellow Taoists, Junior Marshal's sister and I will go first. Once the details were settled, Yong Ryu cupped her hands to bid farewell. The 2 of them chose the left path. If they encountered too many forks in the road, they would come back early and notify the others through voice transmission. Jean Sure said, then we'll also go. Once he finished speaking, he didn't waste any time and led his 2 brothers to the right path. Finally, there were only the 2 of them left. Mo Tianga and Nia Wushang glanced at each other then sighed and walked towards the middle passage. After walking for a while, when their divine senses couldn't detect the traces of the other 2 people, Nia Wushang suddenly asked, your idea isn't just to gather everyone together, right? Mo Tianga glanced at her then shook her head with a bitter smile. Sure enough, I still can't hide it from you. You're right, this proposal actually has another meaning. If we can gather everyone together, of course it'll be good, but if this road is blocked and everyone gets separated, it'll actually buy time for everyone. If they split up, that monster could only chase one target at a time, so the others would be relatively safer. If they cooperated well, they'd consume less spiritual aura, which would allow them to hold on for a while longer. This method might not necessarily guarantee everyone's safety, but even if someone was sacrificed, it could buy time for the others. They agreed so straightforwardly, so it's not like they didn't know what you meant. I know. Mo Tianga didn't try to hide it. But they're all strangers. How could they refuse to sacrifice some people in exchange for their own safety? In any case, I was the one who made this proposal, so they just need to acquiesce. But if they're the ones sacrificing themselves, then they can only blame their bad luck. It's the same for us, Mo Tianga said flatly. Now, she wouldn't be affected by this kind of thing. On the path of cultivation, sometimes luck was the key. If you were lucky, you could advance step by step, but if you were unlucky, you could only become someone else's stepping stone. Nia Wushang was silent. She was even more accustomed to this kind of thing than Mo Tianga. After a while, she once again asked, but this isn't your ultimate goal, right? Mo Tianga turned her head and smiled at her. I have to ask you about that. Actually, you know that monster, right? You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.